blocking it.
Okay, yeah, I'll look into it.
So just check it, I can't understand, cause so I don't know what's going on.
There's a hard copy
Okay,
for you.
yeah.
I'll put it on your
I
desk.
thought you, yeah, Josh is really good about that. Thank you, it's just, everything's crazy. Gotta calm down.
That's what you need copies of?
Yeah,
Yeah, I got you.
so there's three of the,
Okay,
yeah, no problem.
I'll do that. How many you need? Just enough for everybody.
yeah, we want, what, about three to five copies for the audience, just in case?
Sure, yeah, so like 10 or...
Okay, appreciate it. So you stepping in for Holly today?
No, we have to do some switching, because we're going to the Zoom meeting.
Okay.
So to switch it, I have to go underneath there, so that way she doesn't have to crawl underneath there.
I'm sorry, have I met you before?
I don't know if I have or not. I guess I see you on the video so often. My name is Carly.
Larry, nice meeting you, and we
Nice
appreciate,
to meet you.
appreciate the help.
Yeah. I watch you guys downstairs, so nice to meet you.
Making sure everything's kosher.
Yeah, we make sure we're recording and let Holly know, yep, we're good. And
Okay.
so I do video editing and graphics and stuff like that.
Cool.
So, I see you guys.
I appreciate
I
it.
listen to you guys.
A few people are, I guess.
Yeah. It's the public, right?
Ouch. That one up there get cut off.
Great.
Mics are not right now, sorry.
This was supposed to be this time, but it was here as a...
Let's blow them out so you can read this guy. kick you to kick me to keep me in line. Okay, hello, everybody, and welcome to another Utility Advisory Committee meeting. And guess we'll confirm the posting, Josh. Okay, thanks. And so we have Howard and Greg on the phone. Eileen and Ned and Marty and myself are here. So right at this time, we do not have Andy. So we have 6 out of the 7 are present today. And I guess we will go to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is yours. Okay, and for the record, then, we now have Andy, so we have all 7 of the committee members are here today, with 2 being on the phone, just as a reminder. Okay, so we will start off with the public comment form, and just a reminder that the initial comment is just relating to the agenda items. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make a statement?
Thank you, Chairman Carr, members of the committee. My name's Karen McManus. I'm here to speak on the item for the potential recycling or reuse of wastewater. I do appreciate the fact that this was brought back to the committee for further discussion. It's obviously a significant expense. I also appreciate the fact that there was so much input last month from committee members on potential solutions to this problem, and that now there are some dollar amounts that are being presented to allow, I think, for a better discussion and evaluation of which way, which type of reuse would be best. We certainly, I think as a town, everybody would like to see that water get reused. The question is, how do we do that, and what is the expense, and how is it in the best interest of the residents? So I look forward to further discussion. Again, thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Is there anything, Josh, for online or calls in or anything? I mean, emails? Okay. So we'll close out the first public comment form, and we will. Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you. So if anybody has any, if would like to call in, you can call in at 702-589-9629. So if anybody just called in, we seem to didn't catch it. So if somebody just called in, please try again.
Public comment at the Utility Advisory Committee meeting.
Go for it.
Yes, good afternoon, board members. Fred Volz for the record. The following questions and observations relate to agenda items 2 and 3. Regarding the new Raftellus study, its last rate consulting work for the city was to have given city finance staff the ability to adjust variables in the software model to reflect changes in circumstances after completion of that consulting engagement. Apparently, that was not possible for whatever reasons. Are there any safeguards or provisions in the current contract to give city finance staff the ability to adjust variables if water consumption declines because of declining supply, conservation measures, and revenue to the water fund also declines? Under that last set of possibilities, water rates would need to rise to cover operating and capital costs. In completing the rate study, how will Raftellus measure revenue sufficiency when monthly revenues are not split out and posted by a utility fund in the city's munis accounting system to reflect segmented, unrestricted cash, which is now commingled into one large, unidentified account? On the electric side, how will the rate model prospectively reflect replacement of electricity no longer available from Hoover Dam if Lake Mead reaches dead pool? We may not have the available transmission capacity to replace Hoover Dam power, but even if we do, the cost will be far higher than what BC pays for Hoover Dam power. Moving on to agenda item number 3, the latest conservation agreement among 6 states suggests Nevada will face at least a 1/3 cut in its Colorado River allocation. The cuts may grow depending upon whether California will be cutting its usage to bring the savings up to the targeted 4 million acre-feet per year. BC's cuts in city government's water usage do not make a meaningful contribution toward meeting these criteria. Nowhere in the SNWA slideshow is the amount SNWA might contribute to any of the 4 project options stated. Is the number still 26 million or some other amount? Will the contributed amount change with the selected option ultimately pursued? Will BC need to float another bond issue to pay the amount SNWA will not cover from its revenues? Will excess processed wastewater retained in BC for irrigation be stored during low demand periods, such as the fall, winter, and spring, at the Black Mountain storage area? Similarly, in options 1 and 4, we see a 50% fudge factor, the same number when rights-of-way acquisitions only and rights-of-way plus $200 per linear foot of slip lining are considerations. Not only is the extra cost factor excessive on its face, but how can the same 50% apply when one of these items accompanies one option and 2 of them supposedly accompanies the other option? Since we do not have irrigation consumption numbers for the individual city parks, we do not know how much more they add to city facility total water consumption. We can compare the 733 million gallons of annual use for irrigation at the 2 city golf courses versus the roughly 360 million gallons of wastewater and know that BC has still failed to implement significant cuts in its city government water usage. More substantial savings come from material irrigation reductions, not recycling wastewater. If the city proceeds with the wastewater reuse, who will conduct the environmental studies to determine who this would impact and how this would impact wildlife using the existing stored and discharged water for some other purpose than it is presently? And I would ask that these comments be added to the record verbatim. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, we'll wait just a little bit longer in case anybody else wants to call in. Okay, so I think that's, don't hear anything else, so we will close the first comment period, and we will go to item number 1 for possible action approval of January 11th Utility Committee meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes? Okay, so just for clarification, the first, so depending on how everybody's getting the packets out nowadays. The first packet came with Eileen being part of the members in the first packet. The second packet had that corrected, so that's the way the minutes would be shown, right? With that, okay. So just clarification on that. I don't have anything additional, so if nobody else does, then I will make a motion to approve the minutes. Second. Any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any against, say nay. Greg and Howard?
Aye. Greg. Aye.
Okay, thank you. So I'll do my best to ask you, because I know we have a delay and all that fun stuff, so, and if somebody else will remind me. So that's unanimous. Okay, so we will close out the minutes. And are we ready for the Raft Hills presentation?
Yeah, it looks like it's coming up.
Okay.
Colin,
so-
can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you great. Thank you.
Any introductory remarks on your side, or?
Just, happy to be working with you, Colin. This is Colin Dratt of Raftellus, here to do a presentation to the Utility Advisory Committee. And go ahead and take it away, Colin.
Sure. And just kind of a technical thing, are you able to share the slides on your end so I can see that we're seeing the same thing, or?
We are not able to do that.
Okay, and you have it called up though.
Right, but we will confirm that we do see your
Okay.
slides on the screen.
Excellent. Okay,
Yep.
so I'll just sort of direct where that goes, and then if we need to move back and forth, we can just sort of reference the slide number. So I've got it in front of me printed out, so we should be good. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to just that second slide that shows the agenda.
So can you broadcast that from the only way that,
I can.
okay, that's
that
perfect,
might-
because we would have
yeah, I'll
a
do that.
significant delay if we,
Oh, okay. Let me call it up. Okay, one more second. Share. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we lost remote audio.
Okay, I think they're working on the other end, so we'll give it just a minute and then see if you get it back or not.
Can you see my screen now?
yep, we can see your screen.
Okay. All right.
Can
I'll
you
just
hear Greg?
sit down.
Greg, can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Colin.
Okay. All right. We got it now. All right. So you should see I'm gonna zoom out. Well, yeah, this is good, I think. Okay. So just in terms of the agenda for our time together, we'll review the schedule that we have that kind of gets us from where we are today to our endpoint, which would be that presentation of final study results. We'll talk about our focus areas, which are a little different from what we had looked at in the prior study. And then we'll delve into the just kind of review the financial planning process a little bit, which determines the kind of overall revenue requirement that we would use to inform any changes to our rate structures. And then we'll talk a little bit about the rate structures themselves for electric, water, and wastewater, and just look to get, just make sure we understand where the group is coming from in terms of the areas to focus on for any rate structure alternatives that we look to develop. So in terms of the schedule, obviously we're meeting today. We'll be discussing the rate structures, kind of our initial discussion there. We will be meeting with staff for an update probably sometime in mid to late February, and then staff would provide an update to the committee in March. And then based on that update and any feedback coming out of that meeting, we would make kind of adjustments and then do a draft results presentation of the financial plan as well as the rate structure alternatives on April 5th. And then we get feedback from that meeting and then adjust as needed for what we would anticipate as a joint presentation on April 26th.
Quickly on
Yep.
that, so on April 26th, is that going to be the final report, or does any feedback from that joint meeting, can that be put into a final report?
So I don't think based on our timeline, and Joe, jump in here if needed, I think that's kind of a hard date in terms of when we would need to have things completed. Do I have that right, Joe?
Ideally, we would have the report finalized prior to acceptance of the next fiscal year's budget, and that date is the first week of May.
So what we're looking at then is April 6th, is 26th is basically, April 26th is just reviewing recommendations are probably the biggest thing. Reviewing the report, recommendations, and what the, and then just discussion with the committee and the council. So that's the idea of the 26th?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the meeting of the 26th will give the council opportunity for feedback on your final report? At what point is the council going to have feedback to you?
Well, I think what and again, Joe, jump in here if needed, but I think what the idea would be that, that would be their opportunity to see kind of the final results and the recommendations that have been developed in conjunction with the staff, along with feedback from the advisory committee as the committee advising the council in terms of those recommendations. So that would be sort of presented as the answer at that point, as opposed to making further changes. So Joe, please jump in if I'm misspeaking here.
No, that sounds accurate.
Okay. Okay. Zoom out here because I think I lost some text. Okay. So in terms of the focus areas, and you may recall from our initial study that there are kind of three pieces to the rate process, and sometimes we do all three, sometimes we focus more on just the two you see in front of you. But basically what we're focused on is two things. One is overall revenue sufficiency for each fund, which is identifying the level of revenue that we need to fund our operating expenses, capital expenses, as well as maintaining appropriate reserve targets in terms of our fund balance, and looking at what we would need for that for each fund. So what we'll do is, and I'll get into the details of this in a minute, but we'll look at projections of existing revenue based on customer demand. So if we don't make any changes, compare that to our expenses, projected expenses, and see if the revenues are sufficient to cover those, and leave us room for reserves in case of emergencies and that sort of thing, or if they need to be adjusted such that revenues are increased to meet increased expenditures. So that's sort of setting the size of the pie is kind of the way we like to think about that first focus area, is just overall what is needed. And once you know that, you can make changes within that to the way that revenue is recovered within each customer class. And that's really looking at the structure itself, how we charge, whether it's the tiers or the level of the fixed charges, and that sort of thing, as well as policies regarding net metering, the way multifamilies build, that sort of thing, and any changes that we would want to make there to better meet the city's objectives. We're not looking at cost of service, which is something that we had provided in our report last time. So what that means is, and maybe backing up a little bit, what cost of service focuses on is really evaluating the demand characteristics of each class, how that overall demand informs the design and operation of our utility systems, and looking to make changes in revenue recovery by class, whether it's residential, commercial, city, that sort of thing. And in terms of rate structuring, we're really kind of trying to work within the bounds of our existing classes and existing rate revenue recovery. So looking at the tier structure within residential, within commercial, that sort of thing, as opposed to trying to change the revenue recovery from each class, because to do that, you would need to look at that kind of cost of service analysis. So it'd be structuring sort of within the existing revenue recovery, increase to allow for any overall revenue increase that we would need. But that's sort of the focus there.
If I can I talk about, can we discuss that just for a minute?
Yep.
So I think in the rate structure, I think it's very important to understand the existing resolutions. And so in this presentation, you have the text, you have the numbers from the resolution, but not the text. And I think before we get done, because if any changes are made, we'll have to change the resolutions. And some of the wording, I think, can be clarified or helped with it. And I believe one of my thoughts was on the rate, guys, please. One of the thoughts is that we can help, because your last aspect was that through the cost of service that the commercial could possibly be modified. And I think we can still look at that through the rate structure in that, for instance, the demand charge in the larger scale, maybe we need to look at the demand charge and see how is that set up. So that's only a certain, in the commercial aspect, so we can look at that and see if that's can be raised, lowered, whatever. If you levelize, if that's, maybe there's a better way to do the tiers. So right now, for instance, in water, the commercial starts at 60,000 gallons. And so if we have the same tiers in residentials that we do in the commercial, then the commercial customers that use less water can be charged less water, because the commercial starts at, when the residential starts at $2.39, commercial starts at $2.79. So as long as we collect the same amount of money, then you wouldn't have to do a cost of service. You could just say, okay, if we change the tier structure to help adjust to what the commercials are using, that's another form. That was at least what I was trying to get at with the rate structure instead of doing it. But I guess, again, I think you really need to look at the verbiage in the resolutions also to understand the rate structures and what might be helpful to change.
Sure, and I think that makes sense. I think we're in terms of working within the class, I think we're saying the same thing in terms of the resolution. And as someone who's read it and has seen a lot of these, I agree that there's probably room for additional clarity there. Obviously, if we change things, we would need to change it. But while it's being reviewed, it would probably make sense to make sure it's clear in terms of what it's saying, and that we can be confident that we're applying it in the appropriate way. So I think that makes sense, and I'd agree with that.
If I may, one of the most important things I think we also need to look at is rates to encourage conservation.
Right. And we're actually gonna delve into some of that stuff at the end. And I've made a note of those two things, but I do want to just let the group know that we're gonna kind of come back on that last slide and just kind of talk through, at least at a high level, some of those focus areas. But I've noted those two things, and I would like to circle back to those at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and move.
I have one more question on that one.
Yep.
On that topic of the conservation, we've added about a megawatt of solar, rooftop solar, since your last study. And I think you probably are planning on taking a look at that and see if we want to encourage that, or if we can, whatever we can do rate-wise to maybe take a look at that and see if there are advantages to having more of it or less, or just, I'm sure you've probably got some experience dealing with other utilities, but that is something you probably ought to take a look at, because that's kind of an important thing here for us.
Yes, and that's sort of that kind of distributed generation concept is somewhat revolutionary, and I think an area where not a lot of utilities are really prepared for, in the sense that if you sort of let it, if you take it to its extreme, it really changes the way you run your system, not just from a cost recovery perspective, but from an operational perspective. So that's definitely something we'll be digging into, with obviously more of a focus on the cost recovery side, but that's definitely something we'll be looking at.
Just one quick question. The context in the context we're discussing, what does class actually mean?
So class means the customer, the different customer groupings that you have. So residential, commercial, multifamily. It's those various kind of. I think they're alphabetical schedules in the resolution, A, B, C, D, and then there are more in electric. But we can look at those in a second when we get to the rate structure. But I'm referring to residential, commercial, et cetera.
One more thing on this slide, because it might help, at least if I'm understanding correctly, the net metering under rate structures where you're seeing in considerations, that's what you're looking at for solar, is that correct?
Right, yeah, that's one of the policy kind of focuses, just looking at the cost recovery associated with how we do it currently, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Okay, just a little bit on financial planning and just kind of stepping through that process. At the end, we're really just looking to identify the total level of revenue that we need by fund. And it could be, and it sometimes is when we do this, that the existing level of revenue is sufficient. But just as I've sort of reviewed prior presentations and have gotten more information about the city, I know our costs have increased both on the capital and on the operating side. So those are things that we need to look at and determine the sufficiency of our existing revenues to meet those rising costs and see if we need to make adjustments. So what we do is we look at our customer demand and look to see if we don't make any changes to our rate or the levels of our rates, what kind of revenue would we expect to generate? That takes into account any growth in customer accounts, customer conservation, changes in kind of incremental changes in customer demand, like increased solar use from specific customers, or changing removal of turf and changing of irrigation for other customers and those sort of things. So anything that would impact demand, that kind of falls into this grouping, and just making sure that we've got all those pieces together that would inform our revenue if we don't make any changes. And then we'll look at operating and capital expenditures. We have our forward-looking capital plan, as well as large projects we've already taken on that have been approved. And then we have our operating expenditures, both budgeted, which will be budgeted for the upcoming year, as well as any incremental increases in operating expenses, and then just kind of general inflationary impacts over time. The big ones for us, obviously, are the purchased water and then the purchased power. So that's something we'll be kind of taking a close look at. And then from there, in step 3, we really look at a cash flow forecast. So again, that's just comparing 1 to 2 to see, how sufficient our existing revenues are. If we have existing fund balance, that may help us kind of step into revenue adjustments over time, because we can use some of that to smooth into any adjustments that we may need to make. But ultimately, what this process tells us is when we look to change the rate structures, how much in total are we working with, so that we know what that overall target is when we're evaluating rate structure alternatives. Because basically what we want is alternatives that all generate the same amount of revenue in total, which is the revenue that we need to fund our expenses.
If I can go back to that slide
go ahead.
really quick. So I think two things that are very important, and if Raf Tillis and the city can discuss it, offsets for especially electrical and possibly relating to capital, is if there's any way we can get some additional funds from the leasing revenue or something. Because as you'll see, if you've not already seen, is that you've got a large capital that was presented for the next 5 years. So I think that we might have to look at that. We're looking at $42 million, if I understand correctly. In my presentation, I needed to revamp my numbers a little better. So hopefully that's what this will bring out a lot, because I think my numbers needed to be tweaked a little bit more than what I presented, also to try to show what the revenue requirement is. But it's a large amount. And so it's gonna be a large hike for the electrical if we can't get some type of, most likely some type of offset. And so I just wanna have that consideration.
Right, yeah. And we can definitely have that discussion. That makes a big difference. Obviously, it had an impact on kind of those prior projections because we were able to use the lease revenues or assume that we could use them to help offset some of those one-time capital costs. And then obviously we have other kind of external sort of ongoing sources of revenue like the infrastructure sales tax and that sort of thing that help offset those costs as well. But that's definitely part of the discussion, and it may be just kind of here's sort of what things look like in the absence of additional offsets, and if we were to layer those in, how does that sort of change things and mitigate any revenue adjustments that we might need? So that's definitely a unique part of what Boulder City has going on, but it's also an important part because it can be have a substantial impact.
And the other thing too is like, if I can ask this meeting, if it's possible, that when you can think about it, is with the tier system and everything that you're going to get into next, I know, is there a way to sort of show, because I think you have to sort of start there. Can you say, here is what everybody would have to pay for if we were to collect O&M? So per kilowatt hour, here is it's sort of a composite rate, for instance. And then here is what everybody would have to pay if it were for capital, O&M and capital. So what that would do is saying that residential, commercial, everybody would be, this is the bottom line that you'd have to pay, whether it's $2 a kilowatt hour. Not $2 for the $2 for your water, sorry.
hopefully not that much.
Yeah, but whether you're looking at 10 cents,
Yeah.
11 cents, or something for electrical. But I think that was one thing I wasn't really able to get clear in my presentation was some of that, I think, to sort of just a starting point. And so I don't know if that's something that's too much of an ask, or do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I understand. It's what it tells you is sort of, for a given impact to the customer, sort of how does that break down between operating and capital expenditures and that sort of thing. So I think that's definitely doable. One thing that we have that's somewhat unique in Boulder City is just it's getting more expensive, but the proportion of our electric expenditures, for example, that power purchases makes up is kind of, relatively speaking, not very large relative to some other places where we do this sort of work. It's not unusual to see that be 60 to 70% of the cost is just buying power. Now that may change over time, but that is something to sort of recognize. And I think breakdowns like that, I think, help the customer understand, if I'm paying X cents per kilowatt hour, what does that actually go to? And I think that's helpful.
Right, and the other thing too, like in water, you need to make sure that we're because the way I tried to break it out is that you have retail and wholesale. So your city is wholesale, and the commercial and residents are retail. And so in the water, you have about 37%. Well, so you've got about 63% that of retail, and then you're not getting any revenue off of 37% of it. And the electrical, I think it might only be that there's only 4 of it. So that way you have to take that amount that you're actually getting retail from to say this is what everybody would pay. So you know that better than I do, but that's just one thing that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I think one thing I watched your prior presentations, one idea that I thought would be helpful, and we sort of taken a step in that direction, I think, on the bill, if I'm remembering correctly, is just making sure customers understand how much of our costs are really completely under our control, because like the purchased water, for example, is a pretty significant portion of the cost, and it's a significant portion of the fixed charge. So obviously we need to recover that, and that's our source for the water. But just making sure customers understand kind of how that bill breaks down, as well as what customer classes share and what costs. And in our case, we have the city, I think you were alluding to, pays the wholesale, the average wholesale cost, versus the others that pay the wholesale plus our retail distribution cost.
Right, and so if we can explain that more, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. I just put these in here. I didn't necessarily intend for us to try to solve this today, but maybe we can back up and look at them for reference for specific questions. So I'm going to go to the end, but if we want to back up and talk about specific rates or, just kind of areas of interest, we can certainly do that. But I did want to jump right back here and just sort of focus the group on what I pulled out as some of the issues, and just looking at prior presentations and discussions. And what I'd like to do is just make sure, one, that I've characterized these accurately, and that I understand sort of where the group's coming from based on prior presentations, and then also just make sure that there's nothing else that we need to be sort of digging into for this. And then if we need to back up and ask about anything specific on the rate schedules, we can certainly do that. We obviously won't be deciding exactly how to change them today, but I think what we're looking for is sort of some high-level direction on sort of, focus your attention here. Things like we started to talk about earlier, like conservation. I mentioned the offsets there and what opportunities there might be there. So just to highlight them quickly, there were some areas that sort of impacted both electric and water, which are the primary kind of focuses. We can talk about wastewater if there are issues there that we need to discuss. But one, just from an overall sort of financial sufficiency perspective, is the wholesale cost of both water and power, and what that will look like going forward, both in terms of what our demand might be, as well as projecting that future cost. And then looking at account growth and demand projections, I mentioned that. That's an important focus. Obviously, there's a need to conserve water, but that will impact our revenues, and that will impact our revenues more than it impacts our expenses, because our rates include more than just the cost of buying the water and the power. So that's an important consideration. I think there's an interest in exploring the tiered rates in terms of the breakdown there. We talked about that a few minutes ago, as well as just what can we do to encourage conservation in the rate structure and what the impacts of that might be. In terms of specific issues, I noted the net metering policy, which is sort of how we approach solar and looking at cost recovery there. And one thing that stood out in sort of the prior discussions that we often raise is just making sure that we're still able to recover the costs of getting customers the power. If they generate their own power, then obviously that's power that we don't necessarily need to purchase, but we still have to recover the cost of getting them the power via our substations, transmission lines, transformers, et cetera. So we still have all of our distribution costs that need to be recovered, and just making sure that cost recovery is aligned there. Purchase power rider, looking at that. We have a built-in mechanism for addressing increases in purchase power beyond a certain level. So just now that we've sort of had to put that in place, maybe evaluating what that policy looks like and if it needs to be adjusted. And then on the water side, there'll be some changes to Cascada as a large customer. That was raised as an issue. That's one of those examples of a change in incremental demand that we'd want to make sure we factor in, because that's a sizable change there. The way that the calculation is done for multifamily properties, whether it's a charge per unit or a focus more on the master meter and how that's split between our costs and the SNWA cost. That's something that I saw an interest in looking at, as well as those charges for the largest meters, which are scaled up by the capacity of the meter and to some extent informed by the size of the SNWA charge. But just looking and making sure that those are appropriate and where we need them to be. So those are the things that I sort of pulled out of the prior presentations. But I did want to sort of open it up to see if there's anything, if I've characterized any of these, if I make sure I've characterized them appropriately, but also just to see if there are any other things that kind of within the bounds of looking at the rate structures for each class that we'd want to maybe delve into or make sure that we address as we look at these things.
Well, the one thing on conservation, I think we want to make sure we all understand is that if we can conserve in the city water issues, like the golf courses especially, then we don't lose revenue. So that's a major factor to look at. We want to make sure that all the residents and commercial conserves the best they can.
Sure.
But I think that's something, but keeping in mind and bringing that out to the public is a good idea with the other aspect of revenue versus conservation.
Right, because that's a pass-through. As it's structured now, it's a pass-through. So
Correct.
we get the benefit of the conservation without, losing out on revenue that would cover the other system costs.
Yeah, so when you've got 37% of the water being used by the city, then that's a big difference.
Yes.
So I just want to keep pointing that out.
Yep.
The other thing too, I guess, our next agenda item we'll be getting into is that, so right now we might want to do, and it depends if it's in the cost allocation of the study, is that if we want to throw, saying, okay, if Boulder City does have to pay some of this for the wastewater issue, what would that do to the sewer rate? So I don't know if that's possible without spending too much more money or not. Let's say you have to throw $10 million at it. What would that do to the sewer rate?
Right. I'm just writing that down. Yes, and that's something that is one that I should have included under a wastewater bullet, because that is significant. That's definitely something that I would say would be within the scope of our study. So we can look at what the impact of that would be, and it may be just kind of an alternative where wastewater, here's what it is, and then sort of what would it be if we have to share in some of those costs, just so we can get a sense of the impact. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments on this part of it? Now, is this okay? So go ahead, Collins.
No,
So I guess I don't know if you've got any more, because the one thing that was in the scope was that there was going to be a SharePoint available. Is that going to be something that's going to be available to the committee soon? And is that, I'm assuming something will be emailed that we can log into something or something?
Yeah, we have to work out the sort of mechanics of that in terms of how to share that information and that sort of thing. So we just want to make sure that we're handling that appropriately in terms of the state laws around sharing information and stuff like that. But it's something that we'll be working on for sure.
Okay. And so you'll be working with the city this month, and then we'll have an update in March.
Yes.
Now, so Joe, do you know how? I guess what I'm trying to get at is this is going to be on a pretty quick, fast track, and so we'll have an update in March, and then April is going to be here's a draft, and then April 5th is the draft, and we'll have a meeting for that, and then April 26th is the final. So if the SharePoint is put online pretty soon, and we have, if I'm in the understanding that the model will be put in the SharePoint, the revised model, the Raft-Tillis model.
Yes, I believe that's the intent, is to share that when it's completed. Yes, the update's completed.
It will complete it. Okay, so what I'm trying to get at is trying to get a view of what you're suggesting the tiers would look like, what the resolutions might look like. So how soon we could see that as a committee, and so we can get our feedback. I'm afraid that it's going to be really tight, and that I'm not sure how our feedback from the committee is going to be available. So Joe, I cut you off when I asked it. I didn't give you time to answer the question.
No, yeah, no worries. I think we can look at the month of March as if we wanted, once we got into the future agenda items, if it was possible to look at the meeting date in March, if we wanted to move that maybe to the second week as a possibility, to provide enough time for the committee then to give a more accurate update. That's one way. If not, we've got that meeting in April, really where we're gonna kind of sharpen our pencils and make sure that we get the work done. So, does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, like I said, I know this has to be on a fast track, and we want it done by the end of the budget time. I'm just a little bit concerned, so, yeah, we can talk about the schedule in the last agenda item, more on that. If we can see it as it goes along, so I guess it all depends on how much can be shared with the committee away from the meetings. And then we can come back better informed and saying, hey, can we tweak this a little bit? Because I'm just thinking that, I don't think we'd want a lot, but there might be some tweaks that we could assist in our advice, so.
Yeah, and I can double check, but it's my understanding that pieces of information are able to be shared legally via the SharePoint. It's just not the final end product the final report can't be put on the SharePoint if it's gonna be agendized. So that's my understanding. So I'll confirm that with the clerk's office and our city attorney and make sure that I understand that correctly.
Okay, and so I think there was the one comment was, well, several comments were made, but one of the comments made about at the comment period was about the model, and I think there is some confusion about the model, and that's something that we might want more time to talk about. So I think so Ralph Tillis did deliver a model. There was a final model. It was a large spreadsheet. But I believe it was a little hard to update. I think maybe that's what I heard in the comment period, that it couldn't be updated. My understanding that it can be updated. It's just a lengthy process. So is that something that is being looked at? Is sort of a revised model something that's easier to update for the city?
Yeah, I mean, that's one area that I think we had identified in the scope is, are there areas where we can sort of simplify things? For it to, to ease in that update. Some of it's just that, one, we had cost of service in there before. That's not really a focus this time. So that obviously simplifies some things. And then just the first time you do it, there's a lot more kind of investigation and digging into the details that maybe some of that could be streamlined this time around. And we also can provide assistance in updating it. And I don't know that was noted in the scope this time around, but last time I believe we had included a couple hours a year of assistance in updating it, if that's what you'd want to do. And honestly, I think you wouldn't necessarily need to rerun all of the analytics in the model. Like, for example, if we change the structures, at that point, you've changed them, unless you're going to change them every few years. So all you'd really need to do is sort of update the cost data and the demand data, and then kind of see if you need to do sort of overall adjustments to the rates in an across the board fashion once you sort of got them where you want them. So I think that update doesn't necessarily need to kind of have the city staff redo the whole study, but more just focused on the revenue sufficiency aspect of it once we've changed the rate structures, because you wouldn't want to change the rate structure every 3 years anyway.
No, I understand, and personally, I liked a lot of the detail that was in the it was a very big spreadsheet, but it also had a lot of good data to understand, and it helped me a lot with my presentation. But I could see where it would be hard or confusing to update at certain times.
Right.
So.
And just maybe one quick note on the model versus the study. We're not a software firm, so we weren't retained to create a piece of software that could be used, without any assistance, without, the help of anyone going forward. We were retained to do a study and provide sort of expert advice on these issues. And the model is something that we need to create anyway to sort of do our analysis. And, we provide that to you at the end so you can see how it was done, and can also use it going forward, again, with some included assistance at no additional cost if needed. But it's not the intent to necessarily deliver a model and you'd never want to have an outside look at this stuff again, because things change. And a lot of things have changed even since we did the last study that we wouldn't have been able to build into the model to begin with. So just wanted to make that note that that the cost of the prior study wasn't developing a software product. It was for the consulting and the models included in that.
No, and I appreciate that, and
Yep.
I didn't mean to be critical on it.
No,
That's-
I just,
Because I
just wanted
appreciate,
to
I
make sure
appreciate
that-
the data that was there.
Yep.
But I could also understand it could be looked at as complicated to update.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think there was confusion on what was there, so that's why we had the
Yes.
one comment from the, in the comment period. So I was just trying to help clarify.
yeah,
and-
I appreciate that.
And answer one of the questions.
Yep.
So thank you, because that looked like that was gonna be another, it could be a time-consuming part and a little confusing and something we'd wanna go over a little bit and
Yep.
and
No.
more for the city staff, I guess, because they're the ones, good luck. Sorry, better way to say that. Anybody else?
I'm good.
Okay, sorry, was there more, Collins?
No, just that's what I had. I think I understand where you're coming from. I just wanted to make sure that, I was sort of relying on watching your prior presentations and looking through those slide decks, and just wanted to make sure that we had captured the focus areas that you all were interested in investigating.
Yeah, and that's why it's clear. So unfortunately, in one of my slides, I realized that some of the numbers needed to be updated, and that's what you're doing. So the concepts, I believe, are all there and hopefully easy to follow, but the numbers, I
Sure.
realize you'll probably find a better way to make sure that they're updated in a better fashion.
Okay.
So just clarify that, and especially, I think the water was in pretty good shape. The electrical, I might have missed a concept or two. Well, not a concept, but I might have missed something in it. Just wanted to clarify that. So I think, so we'll be looking forward to seeing the information we can get, and then we'll have, in the agenda item, we'll look at another item in March to go over this then with the city. Anything, Joe?
I don't have anything else. Colin, I appreciate you taking the time, and the committee members, I appreciate all the feedback. I think that we're heading in the right direction. I want to thank everybody's efforts, and I'm looking forward to coming together on this and making sure we get this done.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. We appreciate your time. So,
Sure. Thanks a lot.
Okay. So again, thanks for the presentation. So Joe, we're good with that, and we're ready to close that out? Okay, so we'll close out item number 2 and go to item number 3 for possible action, discussion for options provided by the Southern Nevada Water Authority to the Boulder City to recycle its treated effluent water. So I have a handout. I believe there's a few in the back to do, but let me turn it over to Joe first. Did you want to start anything out with this?
Just to update the committee on option 3, we did get additional information from Southern Nevada Water Authority on the idea of a injection well. And so that was provided as a handout to the committee members. So the idea there would be that you'd have an injection well, and from where I looked on the map data, it did look like that was a National Park Service land and area, but it's near where we currently serve. That what was pump station number 2 was where the water came up to Boulder City. So on your map, if you look, that kind of shows the idea of what that option would look like. And I understand that there was some concern expressed previously about the size of these projects listed at 1 million gallons per day. So that's where we're currently at. I've asked the authority to look at what would be the design capacity of the plant, which is an average of 2 million gallons per day. They've indicated that would not be a doubling in cost, but it would likely be a double-digit percentage, maybe 10%. So I haven't got that kind of back, but as we move forward with these discussions and look at these options, I know that's a question that's going to be asked, and keep that in mind that to get to design capacity, we're probably looking at a 10% increase amongst the various options.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, Joe, you're saying, this is Howard, you're saying that they've been designed for the proposal is for 1 MGD of pumping, and we haven't included the design capacity of the plant nor the max day.
That's correct, Howard.
Okay.
So no, Howard, I know you've done a lot of research. And unfortunately, I don't think, we don't have a way to show I've got 3 sheets of numbers and information, and then some questions that I've handed out, and then I have a 4th sheet that I've just sort of taken all the options. And so I guess I think you'll see in mine that, and I think it's in both. They're alternates, and sometimes it's referred to as alternates, and sometimes it's referred as options. So we're talking about the same thing, and I'll confirm that as we go along. Did you want me to go through mine, Howard, or would you like to? Do you have some information you'd like to bring up first?
No, just go through yours, Larry.
And if you want to, well, everybody can make comments, but yeah, make sure if you want to stop me as I'm going along. So I think one way to go, if that's okay with everybody, then I'll go over the sheets. Let's go over. I think if we go over the Word document first, I think that would be helpful. So what I tried to do was do key numbers. So the first page you should see has the title of it on there. And also, Greg, I'm sorry, I should make sure. I know Howard's looking to it, but Greg, did you have any comments before I started?
No comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. So what it is, things were confused, trying to get all the data together, and then we have the slide information, we have information that was stated at the presentation. So what I'm trying to do is just make sure that we're all on the same page, and I was hoping that this data would help with that. So what I tried to do is, here's some key numbers, let's understand those, and then some little more background on that, go over the alternatives a little bit more, and then some of the questions that we might ask, and then we can look at the background too, either during or after, and then decide, work a little more with the questions. Maybe before the questions, I can go into the options a little bit more, or even look over it at the spreadsheet as we're going the options. Maybe that might be a way to go. So let me just start off, and then if anybody has any questions, or somebody else wants a little different direction, we can go that way. So what I tried to do is just looking at numbers, what's some of the important stuff we've got. So from the presentation and other information that I've gathered, my understanding is that it's approximately 1 to 1.3 million gallons a day that is treated by Boulder City. So we just want to, then we have about 0.24 million gallons a day sold to the quarry, and that's just the really major estimate, because it goes up and down quite a bit, I think, during the year. So what I did, as you'll see below, I just took the average million gallons per month, divided it by 30, and that's why I got the 2.4. So then if you take the 2.4, you're going to either have a little less than a million or about 1 million gallons per day, then that would be available to be recycled or to return to Lake Mead in some form as return credits. So what I'm trying to get at is making sure that we all understand the numbers, because like I said, I was seeing different things out there, and if these numbers are incorrect, then let's please correct them, because like I said, that's part of the problem. Then below, now we switch over to acre feet, and so the number that I'm understanding is approximately 9,667,000 acre feet a year that would be available to recycle or return as credit flows, because we have about 267,000 acre feet that would be sold to the quarry. And so, in my understanding, that's the one thing I want to qualify too. Everything I understand is that we sell the water to a quarry. We don't sell water to any of the solar plants at this time. Is that correct, Joe?
That's correct.
Okay. And I have the comment down further on, but since we're also starting here, so to make sure, my understanding would be that the water for the quarry, we have a contract with them, and that would have to be, all the alternates would have to keep that in mind, that this water is still available for that contract. Is that correct, Joe?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay, because I'm thinking, it's not clear, I think, in the presentation, so I'm just, these are things I'm trying to make sure it's clear now so we can present to, the city is agreeing and that we can present to the council, however that's done.
It's my understanding that whatever we don't need, that we don't currently reuse is available for this reuse project. So if we, happen to have a buyer or somebody that used all of our effluent, then it's unlikely that we would be entertaining any of these options. We would have already a reuse plan in place. So this is to recover unused reuse. So it's unlikely that the quarry, our current customer, is gonna meet our demands, because historically they haven't. Last year was or meet the capacity that we discharge. We had 15% of the total, I believe, was sold to them last for calendar year 2022. So that's my understanding.
A question along those lines, is the line that is presently in service to feed the quarry, is that large enough, or do you know what size that is, or is it large enough to basically deliver more than 1 million acre feet, or, 1 million gallons a day, or 1.5 million gallons a day?
I don't have the size of it right in front of me, but I think that I'd have to look at the peak that they got. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was in 100,000 range.
Okay.
I don't know if there was an odd month where we had like 700,000, but that's
Okay.
from memory. I got to go back and
So
verify.
it may
that.
not be large enough to basically deliver the entire amount anyway, then, it sounds like.
There would need to be additional
Okay,
infrastructure
I was
to
just
service.
curious on that. Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Hey, it's Greg. It's Greg.
Okay, go ahead, Greg.
Ed, if you increase the pump pressure on the outfall of the wastewater treatment plant, you could pump that volume through that pipe. It's almost a 12-inch pipe.
Yeah, that would make sense. That's a good-sized pipe, so yeah, that would make sense then. Okay, that's good, thanks.
Yeah, because actually, Ned, you brought up the aspect of if we could sell more, is there any dust control in the area that, I'm assuming if somebody's looking for dust control, that would be the first water they would want. So right now, that's our understanding, is there's nothing, and I'm sure before we spend a lot of money, that would be at least looked at, that there's nothing else that would be feasible for us to get the water to, that somebody might actually want it. I'm sure they would be coming to us, but at least it's something to probably look at. So then the next bullet, the 3.5 million gallons.
Larry, I got something.
Go ahead.
One question. Do we know the solar plant none of the solar plants use any of the water. Do we know, do they use water for cooling purposes or anything like that? That water quality could be used for?
They do use potable water. They are potable water customers. The concentrated solar plant uses, it has to be potable, and then they use it for kind of cleaning part of their process for cleaning their mirrors. So that particular, and that's probably the highest use customer. But I don't believe that for current needs that we would be able to use the water as its current quality for their needs.
All right, so they're using it for cleaning purposes. They probably wouldn't, yeah, okay, that's what I wanted to know. So I guess point being, could they be a potential buyer of the water is the issue?
I think they could be, but it would need to be, we would need to get the water to a cleaner state.
You know, another thing along that line is, has anybody ever thought about the city maybe hiring somebody to go out and find a customer for that amount of water? Somewhere we have land, and that's water in the desert, and there's got to be some process that may want to take advantage of that if we were to try and market it. I don't know if we've ever done that before, but it might be something to look at.
We did do that. There was a study finished, I think it was either 2008 or 2009 by HDR on effluent reuse options. So I can bring that to the committee as a piece of information, but I don't think that what's in there now is really relevant or applicable.
Okay, I'm just thinking that, you know, water's pretty scarce, and there's a lot of use for, maybe it doesn't have to be clean, but, for, you know, a lot of different processes that might be worth taking a look at. And I don't know if there's any way we could advertise it out there and to see if there's somebody that's interested.
Was that report, Joe, was that the time when the city was investigating filtering the water? Or there was, because I know there was a filtration study done.
So I'm not familiar with the filtration study. I just know that I've read that 2008 or 2009 report by HDR that talks about the effluent reuse options. I don't know what prompted the report.
Yeah, and because I know that, because I visited when they were doing, there was a pilot plant that came out to our facility, the wastewater treatment plant, and they were trying to determine what filtration process would work best if they needed to filter that water. And it seems like it was around that time frame that was all being done. But anyway, I can't remember the engineering company, but it was some company out of Arizona that was doing that work. Anyway, that's it for me.
But I think one of the reasons we're really harp on this now is so the figures have gone up drastically, and as we go through this, we'll indicate that, and I think it's been said a couple times now that, and it was even in the minutes, that Boulder City might be obligated to put up a large amount. That's one thing we have to understand. And so, if we have to put out a bond or increase the rates quite a bit, it might be more feasible to try to sell the effluent and find a customer than it is to get $10 million in debt or something like that. So I think that's why a lot of us are, we're harping a little bit more on this.
Well, just before we really get into this deep, on option 3, I think is a great idea, but, I don't know if we're gonna be able to meet the water quality standards. Do we know, I guess the question should be, do we know what the water quality standard needs to be to have injection wells? Pretty much, the other entities all treat water, the other option on that option 3 is to put the water back into a lake. And we already know, we should know that all the other entities in the valley have to treat that water to a very high quality, and we don't have anything installed in our wastewater treatment plant that approaches even that, achieving that kind of water quality. So that, we just need to know what water quality will have to be used to go as an injection well, and what water quality would be to go to the lake, because that's going to be very extremely important for our operation and maintenance costs.
Yeah, so we'll go through the options quickly here after this, and then we can sort of put on that, and then look at how feasible it is to try to narrow it down to one option, which I'm not sure at this time today is how feasible that is, but let's review all this first, and then I think hopefully this will help. So the next bullet is the 3.5 million gallons per day. So if I understand correctly, the plant is actually designed and permitted for 3.5 million gallons a day. And so that is something that's a number we want to keep in mind, because if a new plant is built, so that's answering your questions, that we wouldn't be upgraded, it would be we might have to build a new one to get the full quality we need. And then do we need the 3.5 but we definitely need more than the 1 million gallons a day that's stated in the slides.
Larry, and again, if I could jump in here again, Joe put in our notes that the plant, I looked at the permit last week, the last time we talked, I said it was 2.5 million gallons a day, but that was what the plant, the water capacity is permitted for. When Joe pointed out that the plant's designed for 2, but the max day capacity is 3.5. I would think for any kind of purposes, as far as the groundwater, that 3.5 is that probably like a max day when we have a huge rain and is anticipated. So from an engineering standpoint, that's not really going to be what the plant's going to do day in and day out. So I would think the design capacity is something we ought to have these facilities designed for. So if 2 million gallon is correct, then I think that's what we should probably at least design things too at this point in time, but that also has the impact on that is what the expansion of the town will be to achieve 2 million gallons. And I suspect we'll find out that gives us a lot of time. So we build out to 2 million gallons a day. We'll have probably more than enough capacity for any of these options that are being presented.
Okay. No, it's just the number that I was wanting to clarify. This is just a clarification number.
Very important.
But I appreciate your clarification that so that's a high number that we don't need a plant that has to be designed for that unless we say, well, the maximum capacity, and that's what you're gonna look at. So you're looking at a design capacity of the, and so I should have put down max. So if anybody wants to put by their side, it's probably max. I should have put max down there. It would
It's
be
just
helpful.
the way that the plants are designed, and that's how it works. But no, I think 2 million gallons would probably be a good number to be using. So
Okay. So, but there again, then that's one thing, we've looked at, you brought up 2.5, they brought up 1. So just if we can settle in on a number, and so it sounds more like 2 million is what we would actually want to design. So they would need to look at, which Joe said they were considering it'd be possibly 10% or so. And that's, again, throwing a lot of things out. Throwing a lot of information out that we're still needed to understand. Okay, thanks. So the next bullet is 26 million is the amount the SNWA has budgeted in their SIP to help BC return water to Lake Mead or recycle. Now, if I understand, in the report for this item, it stated that we do have we have a draft initial that it states that we're looking at to either recycle it or to do return flow credits? So they've had agreed that they had 26 million to do either way, right?
That's correct, yeah. 26 million was set aside in their capital improvement plan. They call it it's MCCP. I'm not sure the acronyms totally, but that was from 3 years ago. That was set aside for a reclamation project in Boulder City.
Okay, because at the January meeting, I was a little confused because it seemed like I wasn't positive that it was only for return flow credits, and the recycle was sort of a hybrid, and they were being looked at that a little differently, possibly.
It was either a direct or indirect reuse. So the option we were initially looking at was the direct reuse option.
The direct reuse, right, which was the recycle. It's like what we're sort of referring to as recycling now.
Yes.
It's probably okay. Direct reuse.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Greg.
it's Greg. Joe, you were saying that was a estimate from 4 years ago or 3 years ago?
That was what was approved by the SNWA board 3 years ago.
So what's their inflation rider?
I do not know, but the money set aside for either the indirect or direct reuse project in Boulder City is currently 26 million.
Yeah, but I was wondering how much they've allotted for inflation.
Yeah, I'm not certain of that, but that next bullet, SNWA board has to approve additional money over the budgeted 26 million. I imagine that would be just like the rest of their projects, so it would have to come to the board. They would discuss it, vote on it, and so whatever project is decided, I believe, has the capacity to be funded by SNWA.
What I heard, so yes, so so we got the second bullet about or first bullet about the SNWA board. Greg, did that answer your question? Sorry.
Yeah, it's a floater. In other words, we don't have a direct number, and with inflation running like it is right now, that's going to be quite a significant amount of more money.
Exactly, and I think that before we make we finish out on this item, we'll want to circle back around to that and make sure we all understand what the money situation might look like, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you. So what I'm trying to do is just say, hey, my understanding of what I heard last month was that we would have $26 million that, and that's what all of these bullets are, is also to start conversation. So I might not have had a complete listing everything, but I wanted to start conversation. What I thought I heard was that it was thought that the 26 million would be supplied by SNWA and Boulder City would not have to pay that back in any form. Joe, did you understand that same thing?
That's my understanding. We would be responsible for the ongoing operation and maintenance costs. So whatever it took to run and maintain whichever option was selected, that would be our responsibility.
Right, so I think when I'm trying to put it down in here, I think I've done it a couple times, I think I'm trying to, the way I look at it is the initial cost and mostly capital and maybe startup costs, for instance, the Henderson connection. If Boulder City were to pump it to Henderson and we have to connect to Henderson, it was stated last time that was $12 million. And that would be more than capital, it would be a startup fee is what I would look at that for one thing. And that's the one thing now, if it goes above $26 million, then we're not sure that would be paid for or not. But that's what I would think is to help with what you just said, is that the initial or startup fees is what we thought SNWA was gonna cover with no payback from us, but we would have all the annual costs.
Yeah, that's correct. The upfront capital cost would be financed by SNWA, and then we would be responsible for ongoing. So yeah, you're correct. The upfront capital cost is what they would fund.
Okay, so now we gotta make sure how much they're going over, and then we'll also have to do startup fees if how that works, especially like the connection fee. So I've got that into a spreadsheet, and I'll show that in just a little bit.
One thing, this is Howard again. One thing we have to remember too, that if we have any kind of pump stations being built, there's future replacement costs of those pumps and that equipment that's inside the building. So let's not forget, that we're talking considerable amount of money that has to be put together for that future replacement costs for pumps and whatnot.
No, I totally agree, and that's my concern of this fast turnaround and being asked to pick one option in February without, there's a lot of issues out there that we're still need to understand, and so I'm just trying to gather the most I can understand is what I tried to gather in these in papers that I handed out, and if there's more, then we need to get that figured out too, and what are our next steps. So definitely, I think at the end is trying to figure out what our next steps are. So again, what I thought I heard also is that if we're dealing with a project that has return flow credits, SNWA might be more likely to foot the whole bill. If it's recycled water, they might not foot the whole bill. Joe?
Yeah, and that was an interesting comment that was made. I think what, and I can't speak for was it Doa that made that comment?
Yes,
Yeah, I can't speak for her on that entirely, but what I imagine is she might have meant is that the federal government has the ability to kind of make drastic changes to consumptive use if the states cannot agree on a plan, and if that plan, that our reuse plan is say we need to cut by X amount, and that involves this real kind of draconian approach that we're going to eliminate or drastically reduce all outdoor water usage, then that would make them less likely to approve that particular option based on that probability. So I didn't think it was totally out of the question that they wouldn't, but that's what they were considering when that's what the board would be considering in making that decision, if that makes sense.
Yep, I appreciate that. So, but then I guess again, there's still a lot of information out there that I'm not sure they're going to have because we're talking the second council meeting in February that they want one option chose.
I mean, that would be the goal. If we could focus resources towards one and then really kind of hone in maybe the key objectives that we like about certain options that the committee appreciates, and then kind of move towards that, and then the rest we can hash out.
Well, I guess we can just start it right here and hopefully I'm not being biased, but I think that 2 and 3 have more potential, and 2 and 3 as I've stated, and I'll get to that, I think are better suited for Boulder City than 1 and 4 are. So one thing that I would say the easy cut would be 1 and 4 if we had to, and then I would try to keep 2 and 3 alive instead of just picking 1. But that's some of these numbers. I'll try to go a little faster now to get to that portion, but and to show what I'm trying to get at. So again, I'm not trying to bias anything, but I think that's something to look at. Okay, so we know that the money above 26 million is uncertain, and we have to figure out what that means. One of the next things that I think was in the presentation in January, and I think can be a little confusing, is the operation of the current plant cost and the operation of the new. So I guess I'm just going to call it new or upgraded. Is that a reasonable way to say it, Joe?
Can you repeat that one more time
I think
for me?
it's what I'm understanding is that it's going to either be a new or upgraded treatment plant. We're not sure yet.
Everything but option 1, right?
Well, option 4 would still need an upgraded plant, I guess, too, because of the El Dorado Valley issue.
Right.
So I guess I'm talking, when they talk in number 2 and 3, when they talk about a new treatment plant, or if the funny thing is it's called recycled water resource system. So,
yeah, I think it's referred to, BC Water Resource Center.
no, but yes, but some of it says, unless I copied it wrong, I'm pretty positive I got it. It's it's center, but I thought one was service too, so maybe I'd have to go back to my notes and make sure. But anyway, it's still, I thought it was a little different from a treatment plant, so we'll just have to see if they can clarify that too. If they're talking about several systems together, or are they talking about one center being basically the facility? Howard, do you know how that might, do you have any clarification on that?
I think they're just using a term like it's something fancy, like the treatment plants in the valley are all called water reclamation facilities. They're probably making up a name of what to call it, if it's water reuse or something like that. I think it's just some terminology they use to identify that.
Yeah, but in 2 and 3 they use the same thing. So you're recycling the water in 2, but you're not recycling the water in 3 because you're returning it to the lake. So I guess I just need to make sure that I got my notes right. And
yeah, no, it's a good point, but I just think they came up with a name for what to call a facility. That's all.
okay, no problem. I'm just trying to bring the facts out. And making sure that I've got it. So no, okay.
I wondered why that was there. So that's a good point.
Yeah, so I guess I did. I probably made a copy of that, and so it is cost for water resource center. So it is not recycled in number 3. It's water resource center. So instead of system. So let me see what 2 says. So I must have copied it and not, because I thought they were similar. Yes. So it's a recycled system for 2, and it's a resource center for 3. So we can clarify that when we get to that, just to make sure. So I was thinking they were more alike, and so I made a mistake in my copying. Okay. So anyway, but on that line, so what I understood from fiscal year, so I've got $942,000 for the operations of the current just for the wastewater, all the wastewater budget, and $337 for the administration fund, which would be just a little bit less than 1.4 million, but that's for the whole wastewater budget. And that's what I got that offline also. I double checked those numbers. So the 1.7 million below, the next bullet, estimated O&M costs for BC Resource Center, or BC, the recycled, because they're the same number, calling it different, but I think they're basically planning to do a little bit, but one is whether you recycle it, and one is if we send it back to the lake over the hill, or by the dam, not through Henderson. So I guess what I'm trying to get at there is I would think, it would be nice to know, and once they, that's one of the things they're gonna wanna research, but how do we get apples and apples? So to make sure, are we talking in relationship, have they included any, admin funds or personnel, or is this strictly what it's gonna cost for the operation of the plant?
I think it's mostly personnel costs is the increase, so it'd be a couple full-time positions extra needed to accommodate that versus the pumping.
Okay, because it would be just interesting to understand the difference. Is that 0.7, is that additional cost for the facility, or is it just the way that they're, it could even be more if they're saying it's some personnel, but a lot of capital and maintenance and stuff like that, more than what we normally have, or chemicals and stuff like that, filters.
Larry, I agree with you, Larry, that needs to be broken down so we know.
Exactly, and that's what I'm trying to compare the two, so we understand what currently numbers we know and what that, so are we gonna, in a worst case scenario would be, we would have the 1.7 plus the 942.
Yeah,
That'd be the worst,
exactly.
that'd be the worst case, or you have
I agree.
the 1.4, so you're looking at possibly, 2.1. If you include the 1.4 and the 1.7.
I agree.
Or 3, it would be 3, if worst case scenario. So that would be one thing, that's what we need to understand, it'd be very helpful. So then we go to, I just did a quick and dirty on the alternatives, and so what I wanted to make sure that's not in the slide, but was stated in the meeting, was that the 54 million, is a combination of 42 and actually that should be, 50, it'd be 54.9, so it's about 55 million really. 55 million, 42.9 plus 12 million, so you got the capital, and then you have the BC connection to Henderson. So if I understood her correctly, that SNWA intends, if we were to ship it to Henderson, they would intend to pay that 12 million, but again, she didn't know how much over the 26 they'd be able to pay. So
That's how I understood that as well.
So that's a big if. Then you've got 500K that is in the packet for annual costs just to Henderson. That would be part of the agreement with Henderson, I would believe. I doubt that's all of it. And then or maybe most of it. I'd probably say most of it. And then we have 300K that they stated was using Nevada Power costs for pumping up the hill. So that's what I tried to put into my spreadsheets.
But is that 500,000, do you think that's the annual fee we'll be paying to Henderson?
Correct, so if you go to their slides, that was what they had down on, annual Henderson processing fee, 1 million gallons, 500,000.
Okay.
And then but we know we have we have pumping, and so let's, okay, we'll go to let's just go to my slide right quick, as we can look through the numbers and make sure that, like I said, it should have been actually 55, I should have rounded it up to 55 million instead of 54. So if you've got the, now if we can look at the spreadsheet that I handed out, I tried to make it a little clearer, because in mine, they used a font that my Adobe didn't like. And so it gave me 16 different errors I had to punch through to get to it. So I thought this would be helpful, maybe to put it in one spot to sort of go across. So what I was trying to do, and we'll go hopefully find a fast way to do this, is I put 1 and 4 across and 2 and 3 across, because 1 and 4 are similar, and the concepts are the same or similar, except for now we're bringing in the El Dorado Valley in option number 4. 2 and 3, I think, have similar concepts, and so I tried to put them across so we can go together. So the $55 million, as you'll see, and you can't see Greg or Howard, but you have it in the packet, I think, overall, is you've got 2 pumping stations and 2 storage aspects. You've got 12-inch pipe at 7.5 miles, and you have 24-inch casing at 1.4 million, and all that adds up to 42.9. Then we have the connection fee, and so we have a total of 54.9, so it should be rounded up to 55 on my sheet here. So those are numbers, so that 55 would be what we would hope that SNWA would pay for, but that is more than double than their original estimate, so it would be, I would have a hard time believing that the board would approve that. So I think, so maybe I'll just start making comments off the top and people can, so I'm making comments for myself. Sorry, Ellie.
On the annual costs, they've got pumping costs, you said 300,000, and that was for electricity?
Yes, yes. So it does not include the cost that Howard's talked about and stuff like that.
So, yeah, who
Maintenance.
would maintain those pumping stations? Would that be our employees?
That's my understanding.
So that cost is not included in this rough estimate?
That is not.
Okay, thank you.
And so what I did is I tried to italicize the numbers that were not in the slide. I'm not sure how well it came out. So the 12 million should be italicized, and the 300,000 should be italicized, because that's not what's in the slide presentation.
Just another key point on option one with the configuration of the latest solar project, where we had the alignment of the proposed pipe to go along the I-11 corridor. Now that that's not a viable path, it puts the pump stations in Nevada Energy's jurisdiction. So initially, we were looking at the pumping plant being just right next to the treatment plant, and we would pay the wholesale electric cost for that. The current configuration of option one has that, where we would be a customer of NV Energy. It would still be in Boulder City, so we would still be responsible for the operation and maintenance, but we would have to pay retail rates for power. So that's got to be considered.
Thank you.
You know, this thing just looks like a loser to us. I think the only thing that's of any value is the fact if we can find somebody that's willing to buy what we've got and put it to beneficial use. There's got to be somebody out there that would be willing to do that. It's just, these numbers are going way high. I don't see how this is gonna work.
Yeah, so that's the part of our issue. So one and four, I think almost take themselves out because of the high price, but I'll just make that comment and continue on. So, because I didn't even put alternate 4 in my little aspect, because I just don't see how feasible that is. But go ahead.
Larry, is there something, there'll be a contract with Henderson, correct?
Correct.
Am I not seeing it on here, or, there's gonna be a cost for a contract?
Well, that part we don't, well, what you have, okay, so first off you have is that $12 million, that's the connection fee.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be hopefully your major, if not the contract. But then you've got the $500,000 a year for them to actually retreat or additionally treat our.
That's covering the quote unquote the contract.
And I don't know, that's what I'm
you
saying,
think-
there could
okay.
be more than just the
Okay.
500K. See,
Okay.
that's the problem, we still do not have all the numbers.
Okay.
And so I just don't know how you make a well-educated, decision for something without, so that's why I'm laying all this out. I'm saying, here's the facts as I understand them, and so if we can understand, if we all agree at least on the facts, then how do we go forward?
Also,
I would,
go ahead.
I would think there's two ways to look at that, Larry, or guys, but I think the two ways, one way would be how much water we would have to have treated a year, and the cost would be like at a residential rate, or they would charge us as a commercial rate. So that could give us a close cost of what it would take, but I'm just guessing there.
Like I said, I thought that the 500,000 was what they said Henderson quoted them to charge us. So, but I'm not sure I understood properly, so, that was one thing.
If that's the number, then is that at a commercial fee or a commercial rate or a residential rate?
That's a good question.
My understanding is it's a agency to agency rate, so it's neither of those, but that's what that number is estimated to be.
Probably cover costs.
Yep, okay, so,
Yeah, that's important though.
yes,
To
yeah.
know what that,
And will we be able to maintain that, or will that have to be raised in the future? So that's a great point. So if we go to number 2, so we're looking at $32.179 million for alternate 2, which is recycling the water, and then that's the initial cost. And then on the spreadsheet I have it broken down, but it's also broken down in the slides in our packet, and we can go over that in a minute if that helps.
sir, did you copy and paste the information from the presentation that was added?
Actually, I
Or
couldn't
did-
copy and
because
paste. I had to retype it because I couldn't get to it. So
Because on the spreadsheet, on the information you sent to me, or that I saw you send out to everybody, I don't see that on my spreadsheet part.
well, so what it is, like I said, what I did is I copied. I didn't copy it. I retyped it, but I triple checked it, and I thought I had the
Same
numbers.
that's on the slides?
It's the same as, well, most of it's the same, but is the asterisk, the italic is different because they didn't put that there.
That's okay, if it's the same stuff that's on the slides, then I'm cool.
Yes, that's what I tried to do, and I double checked it, and hopefully I got everything
Then I-
correct. So that's what these numbers should match. So the 42.951, that definitely matches the spreadsheet. The 32.179 matches the slides. I mean, the
SNWA's presentation.
yes, thank you, very good. Thanks for clarifying. So SNWA's presentation. On option 3, the 39,364 was at that option that I have. Now we have another one that we can talk about here in just a few minutes that has a different number as far as option 3 goes. I don't know if we have 2 option 3s or 1 option 3 now, so we'll discuss that in a minute. So anyway, so quickly what we're looking at is that the number we have is $32.2 million to recycle for upfront money or first initial capital, but then you have $1.7 million for just the O&M of the water service center, or in this case, this would be the water recycled service system. But they didn't put anything for pumping costs. So we would have pumping costs in that we would have to add on to that also. In number,
So just to jump in on that, it was my understanding that the O&M costs included the pumping costs. So that that 1.7 million, it's my understanding that included all of the operation and maintenance costs, which would include our wholesale electric costs to pump the water to the desired elevation.
so they are saying that that's why they're calling it a system or a center.
Correct.
Because it's everything. But
Yep.
yeah, we definitely need to know that, because we need to understand and that is definitely different than the existing plant. So they aren't apples and apples, because we pump the water up the hill, pump the waste up from Hemingway. So that's part of the 942,000. But this additional 1.7 would be pumping it to Black Mountain Reservoir. So it'd be an additional pump than what we already do, correct?
Yeah, so it's my understanding that 1.7 million includes all total of the O&M costs. So that would be personnel costs, material costs, capital improvements, with depreciation. That was, they didn't break down that number, but this is what we estimate for all of the cost to be, and that would include the pumping.
So what I'm understanding then, for what you're saying, is they did take your number, you supplied them with certain numbers, and so their 1.7 would be similar to the fiscal year 23 wastewater budget. Because the fiscal year wastewater budget included the two, you had some depreciation and capital, but if you're just, these two numbers should be more like apples and apples than the rest of the budget for that aspect.
Which two numbers?
Okay, so if we go back to my, up top in the numbers, where you got 9,042, and 337, those are basically the O and M costs that I understand are in fiscal year 23 budget for wastewater.
Right.
And then, so the 1.7, if I'm hearing you correctly, they've included everything, but it would still be all the O and M, just as if we include the two numbers, it would be basically rounding up to 1.4. This is 1.7, so it's about $300,000 difference, but it's more alike, if I'm hearing you correctly.
No, that would be in addition to the existing operation costs.
Oh, this would be in addition to?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, okay. So
for
then-
the system.
Have 1.2 plus 1.7?
That's my understanding. The new treatment center, all of the O and M costs would be 1.7 million. That would be additional personnel, that would be pumping costs, that would be your maintenance, materials, equipment, labor, depreciate over time. That's my understanding of that number.
Okay, so that's additional what, so you're saying this is the additional cost of additional personnel, not including what we already have?
Yes, so that's the total O and M costs for the term that they're referring to, which is the center, the BC Waste
So
Center.
then our new budget would be $3 million a year.
That's right.
Yeah, so, see, these are facts that we need to understand, and I would think needs to be clear to the council, all these numbers. This is not clear in the presentation, in SNWA's presentation. Am I missing, did the rest of the committee get that number, understand most of these facts? So I'm just trying to make sure, Joe, this is why we're gonna take time today.
Yeah.
To try to understand what's going on, because a lot of this was not clear. A lot of it was not clear in the presentation. And
No,
if the similar presentation is given to council, how can they make the proper decision?
Mr. Chairman, this is Greg.
Go ahead.
Hey, one thing I'm noticing, I'm looking at the mini packet supplied to the Utility Advisory Committee. Option 1 has got 2 pumping stations involved in it. The second pumping station up by Boulder City Parkway is going to be for the additional 24-inch diameter line. So we should not be paying for that.
Well, why would you say that? Just out of curiosity.
Because in option where we're going to take it up to Black Mountain, they've only got 1 pump at the headworks at the tail end of the treatment plant to get it up to Black Mountain. And then all of a sudden we have 2 pumps involved in the other option, which is I'm looking at what was supplied. Option 2 has 1 pump up to Black Mountain, but then when you get to the elevation design of option 1, they've got 2 pumps, and they've doubled the pipe size to 24-inch.
And Greg's right, because they're used the same costs for each one, our O&M costs are the same.
Right, and it makes no sense, because right now pumping station 2, which is at the intersection of Boulder City Parkway and US Highway 95, that's where the second 12-inch pipe for 24-inch total diameter comes into play, and we should not be covering that cost.
Well,
we're jumping from a 12-inch pipe to a 24-inch pipe.
Right, well,
Something's going on that we should not be paying for.
yeah, we wouldn't be paying for the initial cost, but we might have to because of the deal. So I think that's what I think most of us are saying, that 1 and 4 have problems that we're not sure we can overcome.
So the additional size for the pipe on option 1 is to accommodate the planned usage of the El Dorado Valley by Henderson.
Okay, so then that's,
Yeah, that is correct. I understand that, but it should be specified in this plan. We should not be presenting this to Boulder City Council and saying, hey, this is, and the other one is the one that's option 4, which they're talking about putting the second pipe in to option 4, El Dorado Valley wastewater treated and pumped to Henderson. No. They've got a purple pipe down there that's a lift station for Henderson's development, and we, Boulder City, receive that wastewater.
So my understanding
That should be off the sheet too.
Well, I think it should be on the sheet, Greg, but it's got to be accounted for, because I mentioned that last month, that, with the development of that stuff by Henderson, we're paying for it, or somehow it's included in our cost.
That's right, but the problem I've got is we've got to treat it, Howard,
Yeah.
and then send it back up into Henderson.
Well, this, just so you know, Greg, that if I understand correctly, and somebody help me if I if I misheard, is my understanding is that the alternate 4 was suggested by Henderson, and it was gonna help them, plus they thought that the El Dorado Valley construction would pay for all this. But if we do it early, then I would assume somebody's gonna have to put the upfront money and hopefully get the money back from them, I'm assuming. So there's a lot of assumptions there.
But you know that's gonna be such a political football, that is just crazy.
I'm not allocating it, I agree that I don't like that idea either. So I'm just saying, that's what I thought I understood was stated in the meeting.
These, excuse me for interrupting, but these things are too half-baked in order to present the city council for a vote on how to spend Boulder City's money.
And that's exactly what we said last month, Greg. You're right. You're exactly on the target.
Yeah, this has been floated before, and all of a sudden, my thing is, Howard, why do we need, if we're gonna go straight to Black Mountain out of our Boulder City wastewater treatment facility, why are we gonna do it in only one pump at the outfall of the treatment facility up to Black Mountain's elevation, but yet we're gonna need 2 pumps to get it up to Henderson? That's something not right.
It's their bot, yeah, because they're about at the same elevation, Greg. You're right.
Well, I think it was 2550, if my memory serves me correctly, because I was deep involved in the Gateway project back when I was a younger pup, and how they were gonna do all the effluent and sewage and stuff for that. It was gonna be a big boondoggle.
Sure.
Well, let's,
But I think you're exactly right on target. We're still not have enough information to make a recommendation.
yeah, that, I agree with that wholeheartedly. So let me see if we can just continue on this a little bit, and then, then we have some of the facts also on record that I think goes along with what we're all saying. So, we got the 32, we got the 39. So the 32 is the recycled water. The 39 is the treated wastewater pumped to Lake Mead through, on the Hemingway side, whether it's Lake Mead, Hoover Dam, or the river. So I just put it that way: Lake Mead, Hoover Dam, or the river, because we thought all 3 options was viable, or a possibility. The river was even a possibility, if I understood correctly. I'm not saying it's viable, but that was what had been talked. Again, we need to make sure what they are gonna go and study. That's another big issue. I think we want to understand what is the next steps? So just
Can I interject one more thing?
Sure.
If you do the return flow back to the river, customers of SNWA and the federal government would benefit from the increased flow in that river going downstream. I know we're gonna have to we're gonna tighten up our treatment on our facility. I understand that, regardless of what happens. But the thing is, we have an old substation down there by our old pumping plant, which still has conductors going to it, which would be under control of Boulder City. And we wouldn't need Nevada Energy to supply us anything for that.
No, so I think the bottom line that I would say that as we go forward, I think option 2 and 3 need to be reviewed. It depends on how much study you want to go to, but minimally they both should be reviewed. And then all these different aspects can come out, and then how do we want to dive in more in? So quickly again, let me just bring up some of these points, and then so we've got them on record, and then so we can understand what we're trying to do. So we're just, the first information I was just trying to bring back from their slide, the 33.5 million gallons and how it relates to the acre feet, but then also go back up to my numbers as the 967. If you got to remember that we have to take out the quarry. So that's the one thing we all want to do. We want to push is to make sure everybody understands that we're not necessarily dealing with 1,000 acre feet, 1.2 acre feet a year. We might be dealing with only 1,000 or less. that we would be using return flow or recycling. So just so everybody understands, do you have something, was it,
Well, I don't know. If they want the return flow credits, do they want all that water?
well, we have a contract with the quarry, and so it's.
But that water doesn't get counted as going back as credits, though.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to point out. That's all I'm just trying to say is these are the facts, and they're not clear. Well, the facts are not clear. Put it that way. These are the numbers we have, and we haven't been able to clarify all the facts. So I think that through the slides, because it did say in the slide that it was only 967 acre feet that would be recycled to return flows. I'm pretty positive that SNWA said that or put it in their slides. And
But again, Greg just mentioned about the water quality. You go to the lake or to the recharge wells. I don't think we have a good information yet on if that's allowed by the state.
no, and that's what's going to have to be studied. We're going to have we need to understand the environmental impacts. Does an environmental impact study have to be done? What's the permitting, and because if I'm reading their slide presentation right, they're saying that they're going to have to get a special permit from Bureau of Reclamation to call it return flows. So,
And the other thing is, like you're saying, Howard, the sand filter, they're gonna have to identify how deep the sand filter is. And then the other problem is, so you all understand, it won't be in our lifetime, but when that thing plugs up, they're gonna have to go a long ways away to re-drill it.
But but the point is, Greg, Scottsdale, Arizona, and in Orange County, California, which is around LA there, they have those same things where they have recharge wells. And to get that water to the ground, they go through sand filtration. At the treatment processes themselves, they go through sand filtration, then they go through microfiltration, and then they go through RO. So those are three separate processes, and to get the water quality to any level that would go through those processes is extremely expensive.
Well, the thing is that I go back a long ways in water treatment, and we used to use charcoal, 6-foot beds of charcoal for potable water, and then we would backwash them with air and get the silt and all the stuff come out of it, and those are still in process up in Silmar, California. The other thing is that we did for our drinking water is we just built a brand new ultraviolet treatment facility up in Silmar for water coming out of Owens Valley. And I do believe that some of this stuff, we need to take a hard look at it from an engineering standpoint to minimize our dependence on electricity to push this stuff around.
Oh, no, you're exactly right, because even that, we don't have a good understanding of what water quality is necessary to get that water back into the groundwater or the lake.
Well, something I brought up, and real quick,
that's extremely costly. Engineering.
Something I brought up really quick is El Dorado Valley has an indirect source going back into the Colorado River downstream from Hoover Dam, because I remember when I was coming out here 35 years ago and doing hydraulic studies that it was available, and when the water table in El Dorado Valley got so high, it actually came out through the fissures in the side of Colorado River. I witnessed that with my own eyes.
Well, I have talked about that, and from what I understood, I like that point, because I don't understand why, if we're putting water in the El Dorado Valley, discharging it from our treatment plant into the groundwater, why we wouldn't get a credit. And I was told that because it doesn't connect with Lake Mead. Well, if it does, Greg, then that's important to know.
But it connects to the Colorado River below Lake Mead, and if they're talking about a river going back into the river below the dam, which is what I saw on one of the proposals, then it doesn't matter as long as we monitor it. But the problem is nobody's talking about the wildlife. If we take that effluent water coming out of the treatment facility and we shut it off, there's a lot of animals that will use that water. I mean, you can walk there, the marshes and the reeds, and you can see the tracks of the animals. So now what happened before is they said, oh, you shut off the animal's water source, therefore you have to reestablish the water source with raw water. Well, why are we paying for it twice?
Right.
You know, I don't get it.
If
No,
we could establish that that water was going back into the Colorado River aquifer, we could get the return flow credits right there. This whole discussion.
But the problem is you can put a food coloring dye in there and wait 100 years and it might show up.
Well, no, but that's not the point. The point is it makes it back there. Anytime you
It does make it back there, and they just had, this last year, they showed the water coming out of the side of the Colorado River on the west side of the river bank, and it was just pouring out of there. You know, when it reaches a certain point, and I believe the hydrology study is already in place, and I know for a fact that Southern California Edison had to cap their domestic well, when they inadvertently got told they could tap into the fresh water coming out of Boulder City. They capped their well, and they have some good test points right there.
I think it's a good option to look at how fast, or if that water does go to the Colorado River. That's something we need to explore as well.
Well, you and I both being in a roundabout way water, we know that sand filters are some of the best filters around. So.
No, that's a really good idea, especially if we come back and the board says they're only gonna give us so much money overall, then we definitely need to look. Now, Joe, I thought that the committee had asked at one point if the, I guess that would be, it's probably considered a wildlife, let's see, what would they be considered? That would, trying to think.
Habitat.
Yeah, wildlife habitat, but there might be, it's got another.
Environmental impact statement, like you said, Larry.
Yes, so, Joe, have you heard, has that been reviewed in any detail that could be eliminated completely? Because if you stop dumping, it's pretty quickly, you'll have nothing there, and, have you heard anything about that?
I know that the Desert Research Institute is, involved out there. I don't know if there's any requirements by the state to maintain it. It is classified as a wetlands. So in initial talks, when we looked at that when option 2 was the option that we were pursuing early in the calendar year of 2022, it was discussed that we would trade the wetlands that would be lost in Boulder City for additional habitat in the Las Vegas Wash. So that was the plan, but it never, was confirmed by the state, or I don't know what regulatory body would be needed to make that call, but that was the plan.
Yeah, so I think there's a good point, is that could be a no-starter if we can't, or what we would have, or is it fines, or is it, not fines, but what has to be done if they say you can't, or mitigate for it, will they let us, or do we have to mitigate? So something in the Vegas Wash maybe, but they might say, well, no, we have enough there. The multi-species in reclamation dealt with a lot of that, and so I don't know if somebody could help us with that, or basically, but that's federal, but we could be involved with federal and state, both possibly, I'm not positive. But.
Yeah, that would be a part of the project. I did get a note, so the quarry pipe is a 6-inch pipe, it's not a 12-inch pipe that's gravity fed, so I wanted to make that clarification.
Okay. Thank you. So I guess what we're all saying, and like I said, I can continue on to just get some of the stuff in the record, or we can just sort of, I think, get our viewpoints out. Do you want me to continue on with a few of the alternatives and pros and cons, or do we just sort of want to say what we feel about the 4 alternates?
Oh. First off, I thought when it was Doa from SNWA, right? Yeah, I thought when she gave the presentation, basically the injection well came up way late in her studies or what she was doing, so she didn't get enough information. But I could have sworn she said that our current discharge there's a good possibility that it would already meet injection well standards. And I remember right also, she said if it goes in the river, it has an even, I want to say, lower quality standard.
I think it's lower quality. I think the way I understood it, because again, trying to understand all the facts, was that the river had a lower quality than the lake. The injection wells had the lower quality than the river.
And that makes sense. And that makes sense.
And that's the way I heard it. But that's what the studies are gonna have to be about. But I still think that if we studied 2 and 3, and that's one thing I can point out, if you look at that there's enough similarities. You have a similar recycling system, recycling center plant that's gonna have to be for both. And if it takes a lot to clean the water up, to put into the lake, to recycle or whatever, and we can put that on the grass, then we still have 2 is more viable than it was. If the same plant has to be for both, and you have to have the same quality for both, then 2 and 3 are still viable. And then which is the best for the city? Because 2 is I think the best win-win for Boulder City and SNWA, except for the cost that they lose a little bit, as they mentioned. But we actually reduce our demand with 2. The other 3 options don't reduce our demand at all. And so the other 3 really just helps the valley. 2 is the only one I believe that really helps Boulder City. And so it has major benefits for Boulder City. So if we start putting a lot of money out there, if we have to go, then it doesn't make sense that we're putting a lot of money out with no benefit. And so and I think that's where I would go with 1 and 4 being dropped, because what's the benefit to Boulder City? And there's a good chance the board is not gonna approve all that money, and we'd be stuck with a big debt for no benefit to Boulder City.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to ask, Joe, probably better for you. When I worked for Parsons, we did the Hyperion Energy Recovery Project for LA. And it was at Hyperion, which was, at the time was the largest sewage treatment plant in the world. And we had to have a certain quality for the process. And what they ended up doing, and the reason I'm even asking this is because I just saw we got 3.5 million gallon possible capacity in the plant. What they found out is they just slowed the process down. So the digesters had more time, everything had more time to do its job naturally. And when we got the effluent from that part of the plant into our part of the plant, the quality raised significantly, way more than what they thought it was. So I'm just curious, has somebody looked at our how we operate, and see if there's a way of just changing how we operate to satisfy some of these requirements? Because like I said, what they got out of Hyperion, and in fact, that would be a good idea to contact somebody from the city, from LA, to see what they did, but they just made some very small, subtle changes. One of the big ones was slowing the whole process down and gave everything more time to do its job. And it increased the quality tremendously. So just a thought.
That's a good idea, because I think there's a pond or 2 down there that aren't even being used, aren't there? Down at the wastewater treatment plant?
There's 2.
Guys, hold on. The water quality out of, we don't even, we have the VOD and the TSS, which are the big contaminants. One's organic load, the other's societal load. Those numbers, we don't even have a limit on our treatment plant right now. We just monitor and report the values. The point is that the water quality to go back out to the lake would have to include the removal of nutrients, which the nutrients now are ammonia, nitrogen, and it's phosphorus. And there's no way that our treatment process can meet those limits. If the water would be delivered to the Colorado River behind the dam, then we might be able to meet those limits with the treatment plant we have right now. That would take the nutrient part out of, I don't know for sure, I'm just guessing, could take the nutrient issues out of the lake. What you're talking about, Andy, with what they did at Hyperion, that was an activated sludge process, and it's completely different than the lagoon process that we have here. So, and they couldn't do those things at those treatment plants, I understand. But we have to get the regulatory people involved with some of these decisions as well, and that needs to be part of this whole understanding.
No, I think that's so I still think, and maybe that's where, because we have a lot of data we can regurgitate and try to talk about, or we could just say one motion is, if, like I said, I put it out there, so I want to make sure other people are in agreement, is I believe that 2 and 3 have enough in common that you could study them without major cost to SNWA and try to keep 2 and 3 alive instead of saying, okay, we're only gonna do one of the options, 2 or 3. Because like I said, I think, well, maybe just to get us a consensus here, do the committee members, or most of us, the majority, agree that 1 and 4, we don't believe are the best or viable options?
I agree also
I believe
with what,
1 and 4, to really eliminate them, to prove to the public that we're gonna eliminate them, we have to have some firmer numbers. But I agree that they're probably the ones that should be eliminated.
yeah, and additionally that, we're relying on somebody else to process our waste. And there's gonna be other things that go along with that, like what happens when they can't, right? So that's more money involved as well. So there's a lot more unknowns with that one going down the line. I agree with you, though.
It just seems like that 1 and 4 are the two most expensive.
Also.
Yeah, exactly. Bottom line, what's that gonna cost? And so I would think that's a good reason to eliminate them.
I would agree, and I think those costs are just gonna go up.
Mr. Chairperson,
Greg?
do we have to put this in a form of a motion?
Well, I just want to get this consensus first, and I think a motion might be good, but I just want to get the consensus first, and if somebody can put it into a motion, that would be helpful. So what's your thought, Greg?
Drop 1 and 4.
Eileen?
Drop 1 and 4.
Okay, so I guess that would make a motion. Do we just say a motion is that simple, that we want, that the committee thinks that 1 and 4 should be dropped? Is that too simple?
You have somebody make a motion and follow the procedure, and yep, that's viable.
Okay.
Can I just say I can make the motion and say, I move that we adopt, or that we pursue options 2 and 3 for further study? Or do we need more than that?
Drop 1 and 4.
Yeah, that's okay with me. So to repeat the motion back, Howard, you said you move that we proceed with options 2 and 3?
I'll second.
And 4.
And drop 1 and 4. I think that's the better way to say it.
And I'll second that.
Okay, and so Eileen second. So let's just, Howard, you want to repeat that one more time to make sure that we have a clear motion?
I make a motion that we adopt pursuit of options 2 and 3 and eliminate further investigation into options 1 and 4.
And then, so Eileen has seconded that. Do we have any discussion on that? Okay, and then Josh, is that clear, the motion clear? Yep. Okay, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any,
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. And so as I heard, it's unanimously passed.
Yes.
So I guess, what are our next steps? So that's our motion, is to further study. We believe that we can keep 2 and 3, can study it more. There's a whole bunch of things that have been brought up, as I wrote down here, and I believe I've heard Greg mention or something about you could possibly use siphons instead of pumps, especially on number 3. I'm not sure if that would work for number 2, but if I'm understanding correctly, then you'd use the power of the water going downhill to suck the power up, possibly. Mm-hmm. And we might be able to do something that would be siphons and or pumps, or maybe no pumps. There's options that we can use solar for, possibly. We might be able to use that for the pumps, and or maybe more for the cleaning. If we have to go with reverse osmosis or something like that, possibly solar could be used to counter that. And maybe that we could, even if we still have some solar companies coming in, we could have them work with us to reduce the cost of the solar or whatever. If we put it in there, do that. But I think these are things that would be helpful to go. And so even when they say pick this option and we're going to have somebody come in and do the engineering, as I've heard today, everybody has good points of things that should be looked at. and I didn't see that in the presentation. So I guess it'd be minimum, you'd want the next step to be, what do we think should go into the studies, and would they accept us to do the basics? Because like I said, I think in 2 and 3, you've got a same plant or a similar plant. You've got similar pumping or non-pumping, depending on if you could use siphons. You have similar amount of piping. So why can't you keep 2 and 3 alive for right now instead of saying it only has to be one option? So as we've made the motion, I'm trying to make sure that it's clear how the committee feels. I know I'm speaking a lot, but I'm trying to make sure I got everybody's thoughts.
Well, Larry, I think what Greg brought up about possibility of impact on the desert ought to be considered, and we need to look at, could that water that we're putting out there on the ground right now give return flow credits for the Colorado River?
Do we want to make a motion on that one then? Maybe that to go forward, maybe that would be good to make a motion to make sure that the current situation going into the current aquifer, could that be studied to be used as return flow credits?
I think we need to investigate those costs and what it would take to get that study completed.
Is that something that would be a reasonable motion, Joe?
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Okay, so Howard, do you want to do that, or somebody else want to make a motion on that?
I make a motion that we pursue as an alternative to options 2 and 3, that we investigate the environmental impact of the water in the desert and possible return flow credits to the Colorado River.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
You can have it, you can have it.
Any conversation, any comments?
I would like to amend his statement to say El Dorado Valley, not to the desert.
Good point. I like it, Greg.
Okay, so that's my understanding is that that's why before we voted, so we can amend that. I guess, Howard, you want to repeat it one more time then with the new amendment?
I make a motion that we, in the pursuit of options 2 and 3, that we also include an investigation into the impact to the El Dorado Valley and the possibility of return flow credits to the Colorado River in the El Dorado Valley aquifer.
And Andy, your second stance?
I'll second that still.
Okay. Is that clear, Josh? Okay, so then all in favor, any additional comments?
Well, my comment is that, I think at this point, that we're not ready to suggest that the city council make a decision, and that what I'm hearing is we're saying that we need further study of 2 and 3, or the motion that we just made.
Well, we need to vote on the motion.
Yeah, right.
And then we'll continue on.
Okay.
Until I think your comment.
Okay.
So for this motion, is there any other additional comment? No. Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. I heard that it's unanimous. Now then, I guess depending on, maybe that's what, I think that's probably the best comment. So Marty, do you think that another motion should be made in relationship to what we believe to state for the council, or what do you think?
Yeah. I don't know that we need a motion on that, as long as, I don't know, how do we get the information that we've discussed to the city councils that we're not ready to recommend a definite solution for the recycling of the water?
It's my understanding that will be communicated to them in briefings. So once we are ready, then the plan would be that SNWA would present to city council
Okay.
with a decision from the committee. So what I will do is I'll investigate if it's possible to present on options 2 and 3. To this, if that's something that's possible to be presented to the council if SNWA could pursue those and then present that information to council.
Okay, because I was just even worried about the timing. It sounded like the council needed to make a decision, by March. Is that not correct?
I mean, we should act as expeditiously as possible in the best interest of the community. So not being overly hasty, but just considering the consequences of the decision we make. So I think we were doing that with option 2, and that kind of led us to this point.
I agree.
Because option 2 would take significant investment in changes to the turf and the design and layout of the existing golf courses. And so that's where, so initially we looked at, option 2, it was just a couple customers. And that's like, well, it introduces this perverse usage of the water where we end up not having enough, and then we still discharge into the desert. So we're not totally solving the problem. Then we figured out, well, we can augment all of our non-potable usage amounts, and then that's where we're at with option 2, and that will cover all of our demand. So, and I think the SNWA is on board with that. It's just as quickly as we can move, just because of where we're at in the aridification, the ongoing drought. As long as we're moving, I think we're doing our job.
What I'd like to propose is that we put this on the agenda for the joint meeting on the 26th. And that way, if SNWA can update their presentation and present it to the council before that meeting, they'll have data, we'll have data. We probably can get an update maybe in March or April, depending on what's going on, April 5th meeting. But then we can discuss it openly with the city council at that joint meeting. It's only 2 months difference, and I think we can get some of our ideas across and figure out what we can do as next steps. It'd be my preference.
Just a quick question. So basically, we're heading down 2 paths, right? We're going down, we're looking at 2 and 3 more and getting a study on it. But we're also doing the El Dorado Valley discharge to see if that's worthy of credits. How long does that side take?
Well, here's the problem that I see. We are advising and suggesting this. That does not necessarily mean it's going to happen. So don't mean to be disrespectful in any way. But so we are advising for this. SNWA is pushing very hard to say, we want one option. We want you to pick one option. We're going to study that one option, and then we're going to go from there. So we could go back, if we want to do things as Boulder City, I believe we can do anything we want, I would think. But if we ask SNWA to do it, they have the option to say, no, we're not going to do it that way. Am I misunderstanding, Joe?
No, that's my understanding, and we would be responsible for, whatever capital costs are needed. And so just kind of going back to highlight on your point, Chairman Carr, the reason why SNWA listed the flows and all the options as 1 million gallons a day is because they're not going to fund any proposed or future growth of Boulder City. We already limit that on our own. So if we wanted to, in any of these options, expand beyond what we currently have, that would need to be borne on us. And so that also needs to be considered as we move forward.
Yeah, and I guess that's the case. So they would be building, but right now, that's why I was trying to get the facts out. So if we're permitted for 3.5, and you also have pointed out that it's permitted, as you and Howard both have pointed out in different aspects, permitted for 3.5, but it's only designed for 2 million a day. That's what it's designed on an average.
Right.
So it has a maximum amount. So if it's an average of 2 million, but they're going to design something for 1 million, then, and if we have to put in the additional 1 million to cover it, then yes, we're dealing with more expenses. And so I think that's what we're trying to get at. And so to me, it just doesn't make sense to ask, because my understanding was that SNWA wanted to present to the council in the last February meeting. And my understanding was they wanted council to make a decision on which option they wanted to study at that meeting. They wanted it in February. It wasn't even in March. It was like they wanted it that night. That was my understanding from our presentation in January last month. So we're saying there's just so much data out there that we can't do anything, and we've got Howard's, you know, an expert in this stuff. How is the council going to sort through all the data to sit and make a good, educated decision? So that's the reason we've made our motions. Now then, and if we can get council to put it off until April, then we can explain personally to them what our thought as a committee is, and try to see, okay, what are the next best steps? How can we work with SNWA, and what do we maybe need to do as Boulder City ourselves to figure out what are the best options to go forward? So, do we need a motion to try to extend it to April, or are we okay? Because I think we really need to push that is what the committee prefers and thinks the best method.
Yeah, I think we could do that here or on the next agenda item, either one.
Okay, either way, as long as we can push, because the nice thing is we already have a meeting. And I think we could extend that meeting to cover the rate issue and this issue, and we're not extending it any time. It doesn't make sense to rush something that's gonna cost Boulder City a lot of money. If all we're looking at is March, and we're looking at a month and a half beyond what they wanted.
Oh, especially when we don't have the information we need to make an educated decision.
Well, but SNWA says, no, we'll give you that, but we're only going to give you one option. That's just to make sure we're all clear. That's what I understand.
Yep.
And so I'm saying, no, if we can look at 2 and 3, then we can look at everybody's concerns and say, if we have to do something similar for either one and the plant, then maybe we can look at the best option. And maybe we find, as Howard and Greg point out, that, hey, we use the El Dorado Valley, use that aquifer, and then we do a hybrid of all this stuff. And we try to get more people to buy the effluent. We get some type of permit of what we put into the El Dorado Valley, and we go forward. And that's gonna not be $40 million plus. So, I think.
Mr. Chairman?
Greg?
Hey, one of the things that's come to light is the large warehouse facilities that Henderson wants to build in the El Dorado Valley on the north side of US Highway 95, and that's where our effluent water for dust control, mitigation, and compaction would come in very handy.
Yeah, and I agree with that. So, you know, it wouldn't be a permanent, but it would be for a certain amount of time. So I think there's a lot of stuff out there. That's why I think the joint meeting that we can explain to council, there's more out there than is being explained right now. And the next steps are a little more in detail than I think that it's made to sound with the presentation. No disrespect to the SNWA, but I think there's a lot more details that needs to be reviewed. And I think if we can talk to them on that, then that would be very, very helpful. But I think we definitely want to get across that we do not believe it's advantageous for the city council to make a choice in February, a single choice of one option.
Yeah, that's fair and that's clear. So I will make sure that that's communicated.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, thank you, everybody. Again, my data was just trying to quantify the different information I've been hearing and try to put it into one location. So, thank you. Did anybody else have any comments on this item? Go ahead.
I gotta say it again too. You know, we've handled the problem. We cut our growth back in 1980 to preserve these kind of resources. Vegas is not interested in doing that. You know, we have a lifestyle out here that is tied around that growth ordinance. And as hard as it is, I mean, and we need to try and do something with it. But I think we need to try and sell the water to somebody else that can use it and put it to beneficial use. But bottom line is we've handled the issue. Vegas does not want to go there. They do not want to stop growth or even limit growth. I mean, they're just let it rip. So I think that we need to remember that Boulder City has taken care of the problem and done pretty well with it.
On that line too, because I think the comment that's in the minutes is that Boulder City's consumption has to be stopped. To make sure that I said that right, but the comment was a little, I wasn't sure that I understood it in full extent, but if we were to sell the water, and as you stated, Joe, we wouldn't even have to worry about if we could utilize all the water. But I think to make sure that everybody understands Boulder City, so we're not trying to be arrogant and saying that we won't do anything. It hasn't been done in the past because of what we're looking at right now, the costs and all this stuff done. But if we can utilize the water, then that's less water that's got to use somewhere. So we still are benefiting the whole valley if we can find the right alternative. So it's not that we're just saying we're not going to do anything, but we do have to be careful that for Boulder City to pay millions of dollars more for no benefit to us, if we're just benefiting the value if we're just allowing the valley to continue to grow and we're paying millions of dollars for that Boulder City, that doesn't make sense. So that, because that's where the return flow credit is. It only goes to Southern Nevada Water Authority. Boulder City does not get anything for the return flow credit, and it's basically allowing people to grow more is one of the big things that the return flow credit is going to be. It allows the shrinking time now, it allows everybody to get more of the percentage of their water now, but it still allows for growth where we're not. So that's, I still agree with that. So I totally agree. So those are things that we're just trying to push, that we're saying it because we just say we need to look further, not narrow the scope. We're not at the narrowing scope yet, I don't believe. So thanks, everybody. I greatly appreciate everybody's time and everybody's thoughts. Anything else, Greg or Howard?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, thanks a lot. Joe, did you have any last comments?
No, I appreciate all the feedback.
Okay, thanks again. Thanks for everybody's involvement. Okay, so we will close item number 3 and go to item number 4 for possible action. Discussion regarding potential agenda items for upcoming Utility Advisory Committee meetings. Does anybody have any comments first on that? Joe, did you have anything?
Just wanted to comment on the possibility of the March meeting, you know, that we have that scheduled for the first Wednesday of March, and that's a TBD on the update with Raftellus. If we could find a later meeting in the month of March that would benefit what we're trying to do, we could look to do that. I don't know the committee member's schedule, but I would pursue that. But right now, it's scheduled for that first Wednesday in March.
I can't meet on the second week of March, and then I guess if you do the third week, that would, since it's the 5th of April, we'd still probably have some time. So are you thinking that if we did it later in March, that we'd have more data available to us to discuss? Is that what you're thinking, Joe?
Yeah, that was my thoughts, if that was what the committee needed. We do have that April date is a hard date for the draft. So if we can't really get the second, or I wouldn't want to have it be less than 2. So it would really be, if we could move it to the second Wednesday, then that's an option. But if that's not one, I suggest we stick with our schedule.
Yeah, I would prefer to be here, and I can't make it for that.
Are you tied up that whole week?
Yes. Yeah. The second week. Yeah. So, are we okay with the committee? Okay with the first week, and then deal with what we have, and then if we can share the data on the SharePoint, or share the data even blind copies, then I think we can go forward and come back in March and deal with what we've got, and then in April we can say, and then figure out, I believe we've confirmed that the individual committee members can email you with concerns, and that can be forwarded on too, is that correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding, and it's also my understanding that the SharePoint site can be accessed by the committee members, so that's something that you just gotta set up a login and secure, and it's not the final piece, but it would be pieces of information that's used to complete the study.
So my understanding is you'll need to send something to each, an email or something to say how we can access that.
Yep.
Okay, okay. So, the sooner we can get that, so I think if we can work with the data, then the March 1st works. And then we can discuss more on the 1st and then figure out where to go from there as far as how to make the 5th and the 26th as most productive as possible.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
Aside from Raftellus, is there any way we can get more information about our two options, like, you know, discharge limits? What are the requirements? What would it take for us to meet those requirements? Just in case the El Dorado Valley doesn't pan out, you know, just so we have more information on where we should be going.
Well, that, I think we can ask. What I understood them to say is that they weren't gonna give us a lot more detail until SNWA needed to hire a firm to start giving us more
That's right,
information.
okay.
But we also need to know what, reclamation actually says and our permitting, and if we have any EPA or anything like that. So I don't know if they can start looking into that and come back to us.
There was some wildlife information too, wasn't there?
Right,
There was
yeah.
Some questions,
with
all that kind of stuff.
You know, the wetlands. So
Wet-
now,
yeah.
the wetlands, I think that's the way to do it. So, I guess the two things, two minimum things I see on March is that we can at least have an update, I would think, right, for both, for the Raftillus or the rate process and an update on the wastewater. So any information they can give us. But if they can't give it to us in March or April, then how is the council supposed to make the best educated example? So that's where I think we keep pushing. So, Joe, what is that? I guess we ask for an update and we'll just see what we can get. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, that's fine. So I got an update on the Raftellus rate process, and then an update on the effluent treatment options.
Okay. Now
Correct.
then, can we have for possible action on both of those?
Yeah,
in
that's
case we
for
need-
discussion. Yeah, absolutely.
For discussion and
Possible
possible
action,
action,
yep.
just in case we need a motion or would be helpful. And then the big thing that I see too that also ties right into Raftillus is the budget. Can we start discussing the fiscal year 24 budget?
Yes.
Okay, that'd be great.
Hey, Joe, just didn't hear it. I'm sure it's in your head, but also anything on the effluent with the discharge about wildlife, that kind of stuff too. You know,
Yeah.
the impact of that stuff. I'm sure it's on your head. I just didn't hear you say it, that's all.
I will make sure I include some environmental impacts with my update on the
Thanks.
on the options. Yep.
Well, actually, one way to put that, Andy, was good, is, can we relate the agenda item to the motions that we made in that? So that, does that help or hurt? Because we've asked to do study two. What feedback do we get from the city, and the SNWA, how feasible that is? So that might be an update, but that might be in the update, it might not. I guess I'm trying to, if I'm narrowing the agenda too much, that's not my intent, but if we made a motion, can we get the feedback on the motion?
From council or from?
From the city and the SNWA. The council, I'm not sure, but, you know, the city would be able to, have some input, correct? What they thought.
Sure.
By March. And SNW might say, okay, no, we can do that, or no, we're not gonna allow that. That's not gonna be a possibility.
Couldn't that be with the update on the
Yes,
options?
Yes, as long as, it was just given, I was sort of like working with Andy, that it was
Yeah.
like, okay, that's some of the things we would be looking for, and so whether we needed it to specify, or that's just something we can communicate back and forth.
Yeah, and I guess my point of that is if we find out there's restrictions on where we want to deposit the effluent, or we can't do it, it may eliminate some of these options automatically.
That's why I feel 2 and 3 need to be kept alive, because 2 or 3 could, there's issues with all of them.
Yes.
And if we go down to 1, and that one, then we have to start all over again, I think.
And 2 and 3 has variable options too, you know, right? So there's a
Exactly.
good possibility one of those is going to work.
Right. And then I think that's why we want to we need to keep our options open, and I think maybe if nothing else, say, okay, can you go down to another layer or two before you hire an engineering firm to give us more data, and then go down to the final once we've said we've at least looked at some of these things. Because I understand the engineering firm, but if it's just tens of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands, maybe it can fit in Boulder City's budget. I think it'd be worthwhile to add money if we had to make the right decision. So if S&W says no, we will only do the one, then Boulder City says, okay, maybe we can contribute to do both. So if that's, again, that's what city has to tell us if that's reasonable, maybe, and the city council could help with that too. Is that a reasonable request?
Yeah, we could certainly look at that with the budget that we have and see if that's something, if SNWA can't do it on their own, then that's something that we can pursue individually.
Because, yeah, I think everybody needs to understand, hopefully the council, that it appears that 2 and 3 are in more of the interest to Boulder City than 1 and 4 are. And so that's why we would like to, that's a big reason we made our motions, just to make sure that that's clear. So we would have the, so we'd have the minutes. So going back to the agenda, the minutes, do you have a preference? I think we can always do it. You want Raf Tillis or SNWA first? Because nobody's gonna be on the line of either one. Do you have a preference, Joe?
No preference on the order there.
So we'll just put it down and figure out what happens. We'll just put Raf Tillis. I guess we can just have a similar order unless everybody has something different. Raf Tillis, then we'll put SNWA so that's the update. And then budget. Now maybe we should do budget first, maybe, because then if you have somebody from the budget department, finance might be helpful, and that way you wouldn't have to hold them that long. This meeting shouldn't be super long, but if we put those first, then they would be within their working hours.
That sounds like a good plan, so have the budget after the minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, do we want to do an update on ongoing capital, or do we want to put that off another month?
We could certainly do that after the budget.
Yeah, because April's gonna be busy, so, okay. So, ongoing capital.
Okay.
Now, okay, so might as well bring back your update for the next one too?
Okay, monthly consumption update.
Yeah, and
Okay.
with that, you were saying that you had a spreadsheet for the turf to be removed and stuff. Is that something to bring back there, something to blind copy us with, or what's a good idea with that?
So that is going to be used for an interlocal with SNWA. So to add on to the first interlocal that we had, it'd be a separate one. But what we did was we looked at all the potential turf that could be removed, not necessarily complying with the non-functional turf law, but where would it make sense with us to potentially remove, turf that we're planning on doing that to conserve. And so we included all that into a spreadsheet. That's something I can bring to the committee as part of the monthly consumption report.
Because what I think we were talking about, make sure that I understood properly, is that your update could also relate to conservation, right? So you can update us on conservation as well as consumption.
Yep. Yeah, I can give you an update. My understanding is that's going to be going to the board for their next meeting. So I can give you an update on that.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay.
And, is there any pictures or a diagram or anything that has give everybody a better understanding what to expect?
Yeah, we've got a calculation kind of worked out through GIS mapping, so I can include that in the spreadsheet.
Great. So yeah, like an overhead view, sort of like we have
Right.
with these other ones. Okay. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we would have 7, right, if we did the agenda. So we would have minutes, budget, ongoing, Raf Tillis, SNWA. Oh, I'm sorry. If you want to do, you could do your update at any time, right?
Yes.
So, if we put the, budget and the ongoing up front, then other staff members only have to be here a shorter time. So we got minutes, budget, ongoing, then probably do Raf Tillis, SNWA, then your update, and then agenda. Does that sound reasonable? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Does that look good, Joe?
Yep, so I got the minutes, you said budget, ongoing capital, Raf Tillis, effluent, and then the consumption?
Yes. And
Okay.
then the agenda, future agendas would be the last item, right?
Yes.
That's, that item helps us very much. Do we need a motion, or is that good?
Ideally,
Okay, so I'll make a motion that, we approve the stated agenda items.
I'll second.
Any comment? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Let's see, I think we need one more. Was that Howard or Greg?
Both of us.
Okay, at the same time. Okay, good. So that passes
We
unanimously.
we have it synchronized.
Okay, good. At the same time. Thank you very much. So we have a unanimous vote there, and, okay, so anything else? We will close down item number 4 and go to the public comments, which can be on any item relating to utilities.
Thank you again, Chair Carr. My name's Karen McManus. I actually don't think you can limit it to utilities because it's public comment and, but I do intend to speak about utilities. Again, very informative meeting, excellent questions. I would like to point out, because it came up several times during the discussion about this 26 million and SNWA and all of that. I was mayor during that period of time, and what my recollection, my perspective on that is, SNWA was forming their 5-year capital improvement plan. City does that. You all contribute suggestions to the city's plan. That was what that was about. And when there were, in my mind, too many questions, a majority of council voted to not enter into an agreement with SNWA to have that project move forward. So SNWA removed that project from their 5-year plan. So there is no $26 million sitting out there waiting. I think the assumption from the staff members from SNWA is, well, if the board approved that amount previously, they would likely approve that again. But they never approved $26 million because the project was removed. I think that Member Shamo made a good comment about, we're spending a lot of money to allow the valley to continue their growth. What is in that 5-year plan and what has been approved is to run a very large water line, fresh water line, out Horizon Drive into Sloan Valley. Clearly, they intend to develop that area. Also subsequent to that, the city of Henderson annexed additional land out there adjacent to Sloan Canyon in El Dorado Valley. So I think it's very important to understand what SNWA was asking and what the response from Boulder City was not to go along with this plan. And again, as you all have brought out additional questions on this, that was a wise choice at that time because there simply wasn't enough information. It also seemed that this was being tied into development rather than conservation. And there are actions, Mr. Stubitz just mentioned earlier about additional turf removal. Boulder City is looking to conserve water by cutting back considerably on the amount of water that's being used. The golf courses are already planning to cut their usage by a full third. So the pressure, and I don't know of any other word to use that, we have to have a decision on this now. Boulder City has been discharging its sewage to the south of town since 1931. The reason we've been doing it is because we could not find an alternative that was cost effective. And it has always been in our minds to, whenever we can, which is why water goes out to the quarry, so we can all watch a mountain get torn down on the edge of our town. But anytime we've been able to find a use for that water, we've used it. And that was cost effective. But to say that, we're going to spend millions of dollars and all of our residents are going to see some fee go up, that makes no sense. So I appreciate the recommendations, the questions and all, but I did want to make that clear that SNWA has no money reserved for any project right now. Thank you.
Thank you. So, let's see it. Nobody else in the audience, so I think we can go. So Josh, just to be positive, we didn't have anything for the second comment period, right? Phoned in or called. Okay, so Holly, go ahead and put it back up. I won't forget this time. Thank you. And we will put it out to the phone. If anybody has any comments, 702-589-9629.
This is public comment?
Yes, I have public comment, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Fred Volz for the record again. I'd like to offer up a resource on the assessment side for the environmental impact of changing the current system. This person is with the State Department of Wildlife. He's based in Reno. He's the acting director of the Habitat Division. His name is Mark Freese, Freese. His phone number is 775-688-1542. And this area specifically deals with industrial pond approvals, mining, solar farm installations, and the impact on the environment. So it would be very helpful to make an inquiry of him and see if you can't get on some sort of assessment schedule so that you know what you're dealing with on that subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, we'll just wait just a little bit longer in case anybody else wants to call in. Again, the number is 702-589-9629. Yeah. Okay, so we'll close out the comment period and close out the meeting. So I've got 3:47. Thank you again for everybody's help and patience. So.
And I apologize to you. Sorry, I had to say something. No, I know you did. That's all right.
Judgy.